Good morning, everybody. We will call the April 19th, 2022 Planning and Zoning Commission meeting to order. Well, if we could start with establishment of a quorum.
Mr. Walters?
I am here.
Ms. Kirkner?
Here.
Mr. Lester?
Here.
Mr. Hall?
Here.
Mr. King?
Here.
Commissioner Wance?
Here.
Secretary Eisenberg?
Here.
Mr. Chair, please let the record reflect that 6 members are present and we do have a quorum.
Thank you. Let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Next item on our agenda is review and approval of the agenda itself. Are there any other changes to the one that's been?
Yes, so we have a revised agenda. As you see, we added item 14, Town annexation Sewell property, as well as if we could add to the review and approval of the minutes, in addition to March 30th, we have March 15th and April 6th for you all to review today.
All right. So with those changes, I'd be happy to entertain a motion for approval of the agenda.
I move we approve the agenda.
I'll second.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. It's unanimous. It is approved as amended. Next, we'll move to review and approval of the minutes. And as Madam Secretary just pointed out, it's actually 3 sets of minutes. It's March 15th, March 30th, and April 6th. We've been busy. So.
Yes, and you should have all of those before you, yeah.
Yep. Anybody have any changes to any of the minutes? If not, the Chair would be happy to entertain a motion for approval of those sets of minutes.
Can we do that as a group?
I think so.
Okay.
I would move that we approve the minutes from March 15th, March 30th, and April 6th as submitted.
I'll second.
All right. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
That seems to be unanimous. They will stand approved. We'll move on to commission member reports. I have one thing to report. Mr. Beecraft brought to me on April 11th the 7-Eleven, which is located at 32 in Macbeth, which we recently approved, and the engineer had come forward, and the facade materials that were part of the plan that we had seen, those materials are, surprise, surprise, no longer available. And so they had brought forward some drawings with materials that are available that, in my view, were not substantially different. And so I indicated that I didn't see that as a significant change, and that was acceptable to me to let the process move forward. So just wanted to let you all know about that. And I don't have anything else to report. Commissioner?
Good morning. Just a couple things for me. Trust everyone survived the snowstorm yesterday. 3 inches or 4 inches of snow in Thermont. Just, it reminds you to just pay attention in Maryland in April, because you just never know what's gonna happen.
So true.
Right, Mr. Huff? As you being the farmer that you are, you just never know what's gonna happen. For those that are paying attention to the commissioners, we just finished or rolled out our proposed budget, and that goes now with the next step is the Ted Zaleski Roadshow. He'll be at the 5 main library branches for those citizens that are interested. The theme that I tried to work on this year, myself and a couple of my colleagues were along there with me, was making sure that people were taken care of. So we paid a lot of attention to people, salaries, etc. And I think it's a good budget, and we'll see where we go now. There's a public hearing in May as a result of what we hear when Ted takes it on the road, or anyone that wants to make a comment. But again, we have to have that adopted by the end of May. So we're most of us are excited about that, and I think like a lot of the other jurisdictions, we're excited about the fact that we got some one-time monies this year. We were able to do some things that we weren't planning on doing. So I'll remind folks, just like this process here, that our budget, unlike any other jurisdiction in the state, was done in front of cameras. So you actually saw us sitting there making incredibly challenging decisions. That doesn't happen anywhere in the state of Maryland. So kudos to those that make that work. And I don't think it's it's, I don't know that budget directors go out and do the road show like our budget director does as well. So we do things a lot differently here in Carroll. We are incredibly transparent, and I'm very proud of that. Two new folks will be coming to this group. Commissioner Weaver and I had a couple good interviews. You'll be hearing more about that later on. But we've got what we feel will be a great fit for one of the regular seats here, and we also believe we found a really good alternate that is excited about being on here. So you'll be seeing a couple new faces shortly.
Thank you.
So we're working on that. And just a couple reminders of what's coming up in Carroll on May 15th. We have our Veterans Celebration at the Farm Museum. That's all over the website. For those veterans, it's going to be quite the celebration. April 27th, we celebrate 50 years of our Aging and Disabilities Department, which for those, again, that follow us, they've done incredible work over the last 50 years. We've got one of the best Bureau of Aging and Disabilities Department anywhere, and they'll be celebrating that at 10 a.m. on the 27th, and that's also the day for the Special Olympics at Westminster High School at 10:30, which a lot of us support. So several of us haven't figured out yet how to be at two places at one time, but we're working on it. So again, I always do this. I thank all of you for serving. This is one of the most important boards that we have, and I appreciate your involvement and appreciate your expertise as we move through some challenging decisions. So thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other members have any comments they wish to share? Very good. Then we will move on to the administrative report. Madam Secretary.
So actually, I was looking up on our Facebook page, so I think our Aging and Disabilities Peep Show entry came in like in the top 10.
Did it really?
Yeah,
Good.
yeah. So I was trying to
Yeah.
get the exact, I couldn't pull it up quick enough there. You're too fast. for me.
Apparently, the Peep Show's been drawing huge crowds. They moved it from the Arts Center to the mall.
Yes, that's what it said, the town.
Yeah, and it's like lines of people going through the Peep Show, so.
Well, anyway, Carol represented at the
Yeah.
Peep Show County government, so very
Good
proud
job.
of that. And,
Yep.
so good morning. I have no updates other than if there's any extensions from Laura Matthias.
Good morning.
Good morning.
All right, I do have 3 extensions this month. They are all subdivisions. The first one is Walkerwood Estates 2. It's a minor M09025. So the 09 is the year that it started with us. This is the 11th extension on the project, and it is in Commissioner District 1, and it's 1 lot. The second one is Hummingbird Hill, P12004. This is the 5th extension, also in Commissioner District 1, and this is for 8 lots. So at the same time, I think it's noteworthy that this property is also pursuing to go into our Ag Pres program. So they did the extension just to keep their plan active, but they are working towards and close to going into Ag Pres. So, and that, you won't see that again if that happens, right? And the third is Fern Hill. This is P02053. It's the 11th extension. It's in Commissioner District 5, and this is 17 lots. Okay, that's it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hey, could I ask that first one that you,
Yes.
it's only 1 lot, and it's 11th extension?
Yes. And they do, I don't have their letter of request with me. They do submit a letter of request, which then explains why
Okay.
they are looking
Just
to pursue
Seems,
the extension.
seems a little interesting to me that 1 lot has that many extensions, but, okay, all right.
Might be a story there.
Well, I was trying to pull the story from her, and she didn't do it, so
I
whatever.
don't have the backstory. I don't have the back. A lot of these, 1 lots are just a homeowner looking to take 1 lot, and they may not be quite ready to take that final step.
Okay,
So-
thank you.
Thank you.
And we have no BZA cases to report on for this month, so that is all I have for my administrative report.
All right, thank you very much. We'll move on to item 8, which is a final site plan. It's case S as in Sam, 20-0007, Carroll Station 3.
I should say that. Thank you, whoever queued this up. Excellent. All right. Perfect. So again, Laura Matthias with the Bureau of Development Review. We do have 2 projects on the agenda for you today. The first one is Carroll Station 3, which is S200007, and this is a final review today. So I am here asking for consideration and approval of this project. And most of you will recall this. We did see it as a concept plan in July of 2021. So it should be relatively fresh in your memories. So we do have here today some I'll let each of you introduce yourself if you would.
I'm Pete Podolak, registration number 19561, representing 1702 Liberty Road LLC. I'm joined this morning by one of the principals of the LLC, Scott Miller, and attorney David Bauer. Morning. Morning.
Good morning, all. Welcome.
Excellent. Okay, so location-wise, you'll see we're in the lower right-hand corner here. The site is highlighted. Is my mouse working? There it is. There's my mouse. Okay, so right here, and this road here is Dickinson Road, and we have West Hemlock, and we have 26. So it's a uniquely sited property in that it has 3 road frontages there. It's a true corner lot. It's in the C2 commercial medium intensity zoning district, and it's 0.5 acres, which is comprised of 2 parcels right now, which they are consolidating and doing a lot line adjustment as well. The property immediately to the east is also under the same ownership, which is they're working together to make this all happen. Okay. So some photographs of the site, existing structure on the site. They're looking to raise everything and do a retail building on site. Here's some at Dickinson Road. You'll see the existing sidewalk along Dickinson and the plan. Again, you'll probably recall this as we did see it fairly recently. So a single-story retail building of 5,500 square feet is proposed on the site. They are doing that lot line adjustment and have processed an amended plat through the county. That's at the eastern side with that adjoining property. And that was done, it's a slight adjustment, but it does gain them the setbacks required to this building. And there are some adjustments to the site plan which was approved for the adjoining property, as you'll recall. So we have existing access to, the adjoiner is Carroll Station Planned Business Center. It was approved by the commission back in '06 and then an amendment in '13. So we have existing access from Dickinson to that Planned Business Center and from 26 as well here. And so the new development will adjoin via the parking lot at the front of the building and an access road between these 2 buildings, okay? So they are doing a relocation of the dumpster for this property, and some landscaping will be replanted in conjunction with that. In terms of the development of the site, the existing sidewalk along Dickinson, you did see that in the photographs. They are connecting, coming down Hemlock as well as along 26. There will be sidewalk that connects. Landscaping, you'll see is pretty heavily proposed along West Hemlock and at the dumpster and parking lot areas as well. We have the sign details on this page. You'll see it's a 25-foot height and 10-foot width. We did discuss that a little bit at the previous planning commission. You'll probably remember, the question was, you know, is the 25-foot in context on Route 26? The proposal came back exactly the same. I don't know if the question was explored and answered, but the final, you'll see that that sign is the same. There's also some discussion about what could be posted on the sign, etc. So that was the greatest discussion that occurred. This is the same sign that you did see at concept. Okay. And then if we move on to the elevations, again, the same building elevations that you saw at concept review. The east and the Dickinson Road facades are windowless facades, and then you have your storefronts facing Liberty and Hemlock, is how the building is oriented. It's a flat roof. It measures 24 feet 6 inches at the height. We have brick, corrugated metal panels, EIFS, metal and vinyl shown as materials. A traffic impact study was not required per the trips generated for the project. Parking, they are showing 30 spaces. They are required to have 28, so they meet their parking requirements. This is in the public water sewer service area. Oh, sorry, gone too far. I'm getting ahead of myself. Lighting, they do have 5 pole-mounted parking lot lights. They are 15 feet above grade, and wall-mounted lights as well. And stormwater is being met. I'm going back to the plan for a second. Stormwater is addressed with bioretention facilities and an infiltration trench, as well as carrying stormwater to an existing pipe under Dickinson Road, excuse me. The interesting thing about this project, they have proposed a stormwater facility that is within the Dickinson Road right-of-way. This has been approved by Stormwater Management, Bureau of Resource Management, as well as, of course, the Department of Public Works. So they have been working with them to make sure that this is acceptable. So what will be required is that an easement will be established and recorded and associated with the amended plat that we spoke of, and that will happen prior to or simultaneously with the Public Works agreement for this project. So that's in place. So Department of Public Works is reviewing that along with the County Attorney's Office to make sure that it meets everybody's needs. Okay. So all agencies have approved this plan, and pursuant to Chapter 155, staff is recommending approval of the site development plan subject to the following conditions. So there are 6 in your report. I did add one which is mentioned in the report but not in the recommendation, and I'll read that to you. So we'll start with number 1, the developer enter into a public works agreement with Carroll County. Number 2, the easement agreement with the Department of Public Works for stormwater management features within the county right-of-way for Dickinson Road be recorded with the amended plat prior to or simultaneously with the Public Works agreement. Number 3, that the amended plat be recorded prior to or simultaneously with the Public Works agreement. 4, a stormwater management easement and maintenance agreement be granted to the county. Number 5, a landscape maintenance agreement be recorded simultaneously with the Public Works agreement. Number 6, of course, any changes to the plan require that an amended site development plan be approved by the Carroll County Planning and Zoning Commission. And number 6, they will be establishing cross easements for that access over the adjoining property.
The last one's actually 7, right?
Did I say 6? 7. 2 6s, 6A, 6B. Yes, 7, thank you. And that's it.
Very good. Gentlemen, would you care to add any additional comments for us?
I would like to, if I may, I'm Scott Miller, my partner and I are the developers. It occurred to me when the rendering of the building was put up that There you go. It says as viewed, upper right, as viewed from 1708 Liberty Road. What I'm getting at here is the one below as viewed from West Hemlock. Is it possible, if our architect suggests to us that we do a mirror image of that on the other side? Do we need to come back here to this panel to get that approval? What I'm looking at is, putting glass on the other side so that that end cap has glass on the front, glass on the side, both end caps, so it's somewhat symmetrical. And it just occurred to me looking at the rendering there.
But not changing the dimensions?
No,
You think-
no, building stays the same. And that's how we've done each one of the buildings that we have there thus far. We have 2 buildings up on Carroll Station, so I'm just looking for the symmetry of possibly being able to do that if need be.
And it wouldn't change the footprint, wouldn't
Not at
change
all.
the size?
No, sir. It would just, instead of the brick veneer that you see there, there'd be glass identical to what you see where it says as viewed from West Hemlock Drive. I'm not saying that
That's fine.
is a certainty, but we may have a user that says, hey, could we have lighting,
Glass.
windows on the side? You've got us bricked in, we don't wanna be in a tomb. So,
Right, some natural light.
yeah, natural light, exactly.
Yeah, so, we'll try to remember to add that, I think, as we approve it to, if we're all in agreement, that we make clear in the record that option is available to you.
Thank you.
I think is what you're asking. You're not saying definitively you wanna do it, but you might want to.
May want to, and it really depends upon the end user, but would appreciate your consideration on that.
Sure.
Thank you.
Any other comments or anything you feel that would help us with that decision?
Jeff, is that something that we should?
Just wanted to point
Give you
out
the right
that,
to check
with
it off.
respect to the amended
Check it,
plat,
not even do that.
we are doing a lot line adjustment, and that adjoining our property is a planned commercial center that was approved, a planned business center when it was approved. I guess that was approved, back in 2008 or so.
Thereabouts, yeah.
So we're following the setbacks for the planned commercial center, 25-foot, and that there is a little bit of a land swap, and that the piece we're getting from the adjoining property would be consolidated into this parcel. As Laura mentioned, one of the conditions is that we do a cross easement agreement for ingress, egress, regress. We are utilizing the planned business center for access. We're kind of marrying it up to the planned business center. However, we are developing the property based on the commercial C2 district requirements. We would have liked to have consolidated the whole thing into the planned business center, but there's different ownerships, there were some legal issues, and actually the planned commercial centers have a little bit more, higher parking regulations and requirements. So, just for the record, we are developing this as a separate parcel, yet we have the ability to do the cross easement agreements and tie into the planned business center.
So if I understand correctly, the planned business center, when you're standing at Liberty Road, I have Google Earth up here on my computer. That's the one to the right. If Liberty Road's to your back, the planned business center is to your right. You're developing the property to the left that has a building on it that's gonna be raised. And you're
Correct.
talking about the cross easement, agreement is between the
Planned
property to the right and
Yeah.
the one you're building to the left, so that customers can move back and forth
Correct, correct.
seamlessly, really.
Yes, and we will allow reciprocal parking easements, pedestrian access, and we're proposing, basically to kind of connect the sidewalks, and make some ADA compliant, ramps, so that you can move from one center to the other, easily and safely.
Sure. Is there elevation changes there? I don't remember.
There is, we're trying to keep the elevation, for the most part, the same first floor elevation of the building. And as a result of that, we kind of end up with a hill on West Hemlock. But, there, for the most part, it's gonna be somewhat flat. but because of the hill and swaling, we're gonna have some changes in grades in the parking lot, but hopefully nothing too severe.
Sure. And I guess, Mr. Bowersox, this is not my area, it's yours. The easements then run with the land, right? I mean, as
They
you
will.
change ownerships, we're not gonna have it being segmented back out again. It should, these easements continue to go forward.
That's true. They run with the land, they're not personal licenses.
Excellent. Very good. Any other comments?
I have
The only thing I'd mention is that we've had discussions, myself and Mr. Ullman, most recently about the easement agreement that's been referred to for the stormwater management parcel location in the Dickinson Road right-of-way. It's my understanding that I think we basically arrived at language which is reflected in March 8th submission that's been made to the county attorney's office. So I believe that's in place for when the rest of the show hits the road, so to speak.
And I guess, Laura, that would be encompassed within the conditions that we're, as we're approving this, I think,
That is listed as a conditions, correct?
we'd swallow
That's
that up, so to
condition
speak,
number 2.
taken into account. Excellent, thank you. Any questions?
I just, regarding the 25-foot sign, I know we had talked about the height before. Did you all figure what the others were? What is McDonald's? What did we limit them to a height restriction there?
for the zoning district,
Mhm.
the maximum building height is,
Not the building, the sign.
the signage?
Mhm.
I don't know if they have maybe it is 25 foot. I don't have the code with me. The signage height. I don't know if there is a restriction. There must be. I would think there would
I'm
be.
sure there is, but I don't,
Yeah, I'm.
don't recall what that is.
I missed that. So the sign that you're calling for is 25 feet high.
I'm sorry.
Is there a sign on the property that,
Yes, there is a freestanding proposed pylon sign.
and how high is it?
Total elevation shown looks like 25 feet.
Yeah, we're showing 25 feet, which.
So-
And the building's 24 feet?
Don't know.
Yes.
Yeah, building height.
So what is the sign in the adjoining center?
Oh, well,
What the height there?
Well, my recollection is that that is about 18 feet high. However, that was put up when the first building went up, if you will, Carroll Station 1, where T-Mobile, Mattress Warehouse, and Sherwin-Williams. We opted not to the chagrin of the folks in Building 2, put a sign there, even though we had permission, for that building. We just thought it would crap up the streetscape. Having two signs right next to, we have stayed with that one sign there, and would want to anchor this site with another sign further apart, easily 200 feet apart from where that, not quite that much, certainly 150, 170 feet from where the existing pylon is to where the proposed pylon would be, so that there would be signage for the new building that we'd be putting up, and the other one would remain intact. So, as I said, we didn't want to put another sign out front, in front of Carroll Station 2, just too close, too many signs, we don't need it. And besides, that building's close enough to the road that people can see it.
So I have a question. So the sign, I apologize, again, I've got my
Sure.
Google Earth up and I'm looking
Sure.
at Street View.
Mhm.
So the sign that's out in front of the buildings now is not very tall, it's a small,
No,
it's
it's
a small
not a
pylon
big sign at all.
And then we've got McDonald's down a little further,
Mhm.
which is taller. And then, so I'm sorry to ask you to repeat yourself. So
Sure.
what were you saying about, you wanna leave the smaller sign
Yeah,
in
we would
place?
leave that there. I mean, if you're looking directly at our building, to our east is Oklahoma Center. They have this voluminous, huge, tall sign there. We're not looking for anything like that. Leave the existing sign where it is. We don't have any intentions of removing that. And I'm guesstimating from that spot to where the sign would be at 1702 would be the building itself, Carroll Station 2, is 80 feet wide. So if you take the setbacks, we're 100 feet wide there, and then you go over, I don't know, another 25 feet, so that's 125, and then, what is the width of 1702? Do you know, Pete? I don't know.
Yeah, the width of the property?
Yeah.
115 feet.
Okay, so we're 200 and, when you look at it like that, we're, from where the existing pylon sign is, we're at least 200 feet away from that sign to where the proposed sign for 1702 would be. And I think that for eyescape, if you will, that would be appropriate rather than having 3 signs, in front of 3 buildings. And there's no intention of ever putting a sign in front of 1708, which is Carroll Station 2, where the liquor store is.
And do you know how it relates to the Eldersburg Commons sign, which is basically gonna be across the street?
Yeah, they've got several signs. They have a real big one there, then they have a smaller electronic billboard. I guess, 25 feet, I'm just kind of looking in here, this ceiling is, from floor to ceiling here, you're probably about 12 feet. So, at 25 feet, that's another 13 feet, if you can visualize that. And that sign would announce Carroll Station altogether. And I don't want to misstate or misrepresent that sign would be there to take the place of the smaller sign, because the folks in the first building, we have provisions in their lease that they get on the pylon sign. So we couldn't just arbitrarily say, well, we're gonna put up this sign here. No, we want to announce Carroll Station.
Sure.
Okay, but we can't take that sign down because we'd be violating T-Mobile, Sherwin-Williams, and Mattress Warehouse, as they have provisions in their lease that they're on that sign.
So I know it seems like we're spending a lot of time on signs, but we typically do.
Mhm.
And partly because we don't want it to look like the Vegas Strip
Yep.
as you're coming into Eldersburg.
And I agree with that.
And we also want there to be some symmetry. So
Yep.
if, we've got McDonald's and we've got Eldersburg Commons, and then if, I'm exaggerating to make a point, but if your sign is twice as tall as everybody else's, maybe good for business, but,
Mm-hmm.
but ugly, just in terms of not being symmetrical and that sort of thing. So we're just
Yeah.
sensitive to that sort of thing. I don't know, I'm dominating the conversation. Do you all have?
Where exactly is the sign location on this map or this diagram?
I don't know if I can
Yeah,
zoom
right-
in.
right
Is it in the
It's right
middle
this
of the
corner.
property line?
It's right
Yeah.
in this corner.
Practically at the corner.
In the corner?
It's at the apex of
West
that
Hemlock and
intersection.
Liberty.
Yeah.
Well, we'll say it's
Well,
good,
I
it's
would want
good to have that,
I'm sorry.
it's good to have that much clearance underneath of it for line of
For
sight.
visual.
Yeah.
Traffic for trucks and whatnot.
Also, I'd like to make a point that where that sign is, the ground grades down. So it's not like it's sitting up high and then 25 feet from there, because the grade of the dirt is such that where it comes into West Hemlock and Liberty Road, that is I don't know how far down that is. That's 6 feet?
Actually, we are gonna be up on top of the hill.
Oh, you will, okay, okay.
But what Scott's saying also, that you have to realize, is that we have utility poles. And
Oh,
that,
yeah.
and that the utility poles will continue along the front of the property.
Mm-hmm.
And the utility poles, you can see there's Verizon lines that are low, those big dark
Good, I
black
got it.
lines. And so basically, we're kind of trying to get above the lines so that we can have some type of sight. Otherwise, we would have obstructions with the utility poles and the lines, the overhead wires.
I'll say that in the ownership is distinct, but yet incestuous to some degree. I wish there was a way to consolidate the signage for all three. It may be too much to ask, You know, maybe we could concede some size to have one sign for all three buildings, so that the Cork, Sherwin-Williams, you know, no one's rights are violated, but yet we've got one consolidated sign rather than two. You know, you have the right to do the third, which you're saying you don't intend to do, but it sounds like you may have a right to do it. And we could end up with three signs over the span of, you know, what, 400 feet or so? And so, just from a, like we're saying, from a vision, visual, aesthetic standpoint, I would prefer to see one consolidated sign, in that, you know, again, the ownership here is distinct, but yet, compatible. I don't know how else to say it. I mean, Mr. Bowersox, you probably have a better way to say it. You know, it sounds like y'all, there's a reason they're distinct, but yet at the same time, the ownership is pretty much the same. So I wish there was a way to do that. I don't know if there is. And again, I don't know if we would be willing to give, you know, we're gonna put up a new sign, let's put up a bigger sign for all three, but we've only got one. I don't know if y'all have that sort of, if y'all are amenable to something like that, or if you would be willing to do that, but, that would be something that I would be in favor of, because it's one sign rather than two.
I always look at property rights.
Yep.
But I think I heard you say that there is some separate ownership
That's
between
correct. There's
the
different
two.
partners.
Yeah.
Right,
Of which my partner and I are partners in,
Right.
that the other partners are not partners in
Yeah.
this particular
So
venture.
that's a lot to ask, yeah.
yeah. So I,
May take a Philadelphia lawyer to figure this one out.
yeah, and if, should you decide to sell in the future, you know, they would be separate.
That's a mess.
So,
That's a mess.
looking at Google Map again, the one that's in front of your existing center looks to be, you said it was 18 high?
If it's that high, it's not a
Yeah,
big sign.
it looks smaller.
Yeah, in fact, we got a lot of pushback from the existing tenants, because A, that was the first building, and B, that was our first venture doing it. And C, they said, you know, it's a pretty puny sign, and they were, encouraging us to raise that sign, put a bigger sign with an electronic panel, you know, board on there. $70,000-$80,000 later is what it would take to do it, because I didn't realize this, there's wind restrictions. The sign company came out and said it's gotta be able to withstand winds of 80 miles an hour. I'm thinking, good God, when's the last time we had that in Carroll County? And it reminded me of the hurricane or tornado that came through Westminster. Oh yeah, I remember that. So we tabled that real quick, because, you know, $70,000-$80,000 tear down, it was quite expensive.
Yeah.
All right. Well, any other questions? So looking across the street at the Walmart sign, it sounds like the sign you're talking about is similar in size to that. It'd be,
I don't think it'd be quite as large as that. That's a massive.
It's a big sign. It's a
yeah,
big, that
if
is
anything,
a-
it's smaller.
I don't know
Yes,
what the
I do.
size is.
I do.
That's huge.
Yeah.
And candidly, I would not be in favor, as the partner in this, of putting a sign on that corner that looks anything as large as that. I mean, you know, that's a massive 55,000 square foot building. This is 5,500, or, you know, 55,000 square feet, I don't know what it is. It's huge. It'd be too much for us, be too much.
Okay. Now, I'm persuaded. I think
Yeah.
the symmetry
I am
along
too.
the roadway, with that across the street and looking down the street at McDonald's and so forth. So at least I'm one voice, but I'm fine.
I'm okay.
Any other-
I'm fine with it, actually, yeah. I wish there was another way to do it, but I get what they're doing, so, and it is retail. And retail is about visibility, and we want these businesses to succeed,
Sure.
so I'm in.
It sounds like if you ever had an opportunity to consolidate, you know, it sounds
Oh,
like
yeah,
you'd
that'd be
find
wonderful.
favorable
Yeah, that'd be
view
wonderful.
here. But not, certainly not required, and we can't ask it anyway.
Just as an aside, we do not have roughed in by design the electric for the sign on 1708 where the liquor store is. Yeah, we could put it in, but you gotta tear up a lot of real estate, to get the line around to the back of the building, and so we never put it in. So I don't ever see a sign ever going on building 2, even though it was part of the approval of that plan. We didn't rough in the electric, and I can assure you, there's no intention on our part to venture into doing that on building 2. So then you crap up Liberty Road, excuse my French, but that's exactly how it is, with pylon on 1, pylon on 2, pylon on 3. That's inappropriate in our judgment.
Well, we certainly recognize that it could be done by some future owner,
Yeah.
and that's just the reality of it, but that's okay. But anyway, so I appreciate your sensitivity to this. I appreciate you letting us kind of noodle through these
Absolutely.
things. The aesthetics matter to us.
Yeah,
Great.
and
And I know they
frankly,
matter
does
to
to
you.
Bill and myself as well.
Sure, we appreciate that. Are there any public comments? Anyone wishing to speak on this project? All right. Well, with that, then, if there's no further discussion here, I'd be happy to entertain a motion to approve the final site plan as presented, noting that there are actually 7 conditions put forward by the county.
Did you want to include an additional condition about the option for the elevation?
For the
Yeah.
glass,
Yeah, I don't know if it would be a condition or whether it would just be part of the motion saying we recognize that, that they could do that. I don't know what's cleanest.
I would suggest, since we're not talking about a modification of the footprint of what's shown on the site plan, that if you want to discuss it, that's fine. I would urge against a condition. There may be, at some point, other minor architectural variations they want to make without deviating from the footprint. And I think we may wind up entering an area that is gonna turn into the wild, wild west.
I mean, my thinking was a condition is sort of killing a gnat with a hammer too. I'm not sure we need something quite that.
And I don't know that there's a regulatory basis to enforce that kind of architectural, given that there's no change in the footprint.
One,
I think I can give this a shot. You want me to give it a go?
sure, yeah, go right ahead.
I move that we approve the site plan with the 7 conditions, and authorize the developer the flexibility to change the exterior of the building without changing the footprint. Give them the alternative to go from brick to glass, glass to brick, on that eastward elevation. Does that work?
I think that works for me. Does that seem like a workable motion for you? Mr. Bowersox, what do you?
We appreciate the flexibility. I was merely saying that I'm unaware of a regulatory scheme in the county that regulates the change from a glass facade on a portion of a facade to a brick facade for something like this. And that's all I was saying. That
My-
I think we can do it without saying anything.
Yeah. but-
We can, it would just streamline, I wouldn't have to come to you and say, are you okay with this change? Do you want the full commission to see it? If we include this, then everybody's already okayed it, so it just cuts out one step.
Yeah, I think that, and we tend to try to streamline things where we can, so, not create unnecessary impediments. So I think, I'm happy with the motion in terms of whether it's workable from our standpoint. If it seems practically workable from your standpoint,
Yes,
Yes.
thank you.
okay, so we have a motion, is there a second?
I'll second.
Very good. So we have a motion to approve the site plan with the understanding of a possible change to the elevations, glass to brick, brick to glass, without having to come back to the chair or the commission. It's subject to the 7 conditions in the report. That's the motion as I understand it. That's before us. Is there any further discussion? roll call, or can we do a voice vote?
I think we just do a voice vote, it's fine.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed or abstaining? Unanimously approved. Good luck, and thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Good to see you.
Yeah, I think we've got a recess. All right, we think it's time for a recess, so we're gonna go to recess. We'll come back in about, at 10 o'clock, how about that? coming out of our recess, heading back into the April 19th, 2022 Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. And we are moving forward now with item 10, which is preliminary subdivision plan. It is case number P as in Paul 18-0084 Shamrock Estates.
Good morning,
Good morning.
everybody. It's good to be in person again. So, as mentioned, David Beecraft, Bureau of Development Review. The next project we have on the agenda is Shamrock Estates, file number P-18-0084. This is a major subdivision for 6 subdivision lots. With me are a couple representatives, so I'll let them introduce themselves.
Linda Alexander, CLSI.
John Sarah, owner.
Good morning.
Okay, perfect.
David, before you go on, I just need to disclose that I'm not involved in this project, but I do have a business relationship with some of the owners. So I just wanted to put that out there.
I appreciate that, thank you. So as mentioned, this project is before the Planning and Zoning Commission as a preliminary plan. So ultimately, we are looking for 2 actions associated with this project. The first would be the approval of the preliminary plan of subdivision pursuant to Chapter 155. And the next would be approval of the preliminary plan of subdivision pursuant to Chapter 156, which is concurrency management. So for those who are not familiar as to where the project is, it is located in between Old Gamber Road and Gamber Road, which is also known as Maryland Route 91. Here is Hughes Road, and down here is Deer Park Road. So if you keep taking 91 north, that'll take you to 140. If you keep taking 91 south, that'll take you to Maryland Route 32. So the property itself is comprised of roughly 10 acres and is within the R40,000 zoning district. The property previously had a house on it, which you can kind of see where the footprint for that was, and it had direct access onto Old Gamber Road, but as you can see, since the house has been removed in that time. Other properties surrounding the property are either zoned R40,000 or are zoned conservation and house private residential dwellings. The only exception to that would be this property down here, which is currently zoned commercial medium or C2. The property itself is outside of the designated growth areas, priority funding areas, as well as the water and sewer service areas. The property and all adjoining properties utilize private well and septic systems. So what is being proposed, as mentioned, is a 6 residential subdivision lot subdivision in which the lots are ranging from roughly 1 1/3 acres to just shy of 2 acres in size. Access to all of the lots will occur via construction of 2 shared driveways or use in common driveways that will have direct access onto Old Gamber Road. As part of this plan, State Highway has mentioned they are prohibiting access for any lots onto Gamber Road, which is, again, Maryland Route 91, and that is shown down here. So Carroll County Code permits a maximum of 5 users for a shared use driveway in the residential zoning district. The plan proposes that 3 users on each driveway will have access to Old Gamber Road. So the first will be a 450-foot long use in common driveway known as 4-Leaf Drive, which is shown on the northern side up here. And it will provide access for lots 3, 4, and 5. The second driveway is a 266-foot long use in common driveway known as Clover Drive, and it will provide access for lots 1, 2, and 3. Both of these driveways will be 12 feet wide, which complies with our code. Access for the lots, again, will be restricted to the use in common driveways, and a declaration of maintenance obligations for each driveway will be recorded. I believe there has one already recorded for 4-Leaf Drive, which is the northern property or the northern driveway. That DMO or declaration of maintenance obligations will be amended to include these additional lots using that driveway. And then again, direct access onto Maryland Route 91 is prohibited per SHA or State Highway Administration. All lots are going to be served by private well and septic systems, as mentioned. Carroll County Health Department have provided a preliminary approval, but they're gonna require additional items during the final review of things. Zoning has approved the plans. The plan was submitted originally on April 22nd of 2019 and was distributed to review agencies. The plan was subject to citizen involvement during the regularly held Technical Review Committee meeting on May 24th, 2019. No citizens spoke at the meeting, and there haven't been any written comments after that meeting. The project went before the Planning and Zoning Commission as a concept plan on July 21st, 2022. Again, no citizens spoke, and there was minimal discussion by the commission in reference to having a pullover and turnaround on the driveway, as well as the type of screening that was going to be required between the properties and Maryland Route 91. And so just to give a better idea as to how the project looks, these are all from Google Maps. And so this shows kind of the curvature of the lot itself and the existing house that was up there. Now this is the existing driveway to that house that has since been torn down. And this is the other side, which kind of shows that neighboring property that is zone C2 is currently being used for farm. So the development is exempt from the requirements of floodplain management and water resource management. Landscape has granted preliminary approval with an approval of a variance requesting relief of the code required dirt berm and a reduction in the landscape plantings required along Maryland Route 91. Forest Conservation has granted approval of the proposal and approved a variance for the removal of certain specimen trees on site. Grading and Sediment Control has granted approval of the preliminary plan. Stormwater Management has granted preliminary approval. Dry wells and wide shoulders along the driveways are being shown to address those requirements. There's also two publicly owned, soon to be publicly owned stormwater management quantity control facilities that are being created. So I'll go back here. So one of the facilities is shown up here in this area, and then the other facility is shown down here in this area. In the review, the Department of Planning determined that the proposed plan is consistent with the 2014 Carroll County Master Plan land use designation of residential low density, as well as the 2014 Water and Sewer Master Plan. So with all of that being said, pursuant to Chapter 155, staff recommends approval of the preliminary plan subject to the following 7 conditions. The first being that the owner and developer enters into a public works agreement with Carroll County that guarantees completion of any required improvements, that a declaration of maintenance obligations for each use in common driveway be recorded simultaneously with the subdivision plat, that parcels shown on the plans as parcel A and parcel C, those being the stormwater management parcels, being deeded to Carroll County Commissioner simultaneously with the record plat, that the parcel shown on the plans as parcel B, which is this parcel up here that runs the length of the property. This parcel B is to be deeded to State Highway Administration for the road widening. That a stormwater management easement and maintenance agreement be granted to the county commissioners with the record plat. That a landscape maintenance agreement be granted to the county commissioners with the record plat. And finally, that any changes to the preliminary plan as submitted and approved by the commission herein be resubmitted to the commission for further review and approval. And so prior to moving on to the next section, which is all about concurrency management, if there's any questions or anything that you have for myself or either of them here.
I had one question. In reading the report, it talks about, it says Forest Conservation, and you said this, David. Forest Conservation has granted approval of the proposal and approved a variance for the removal of certain specimen trees on site. Is the variance to get rid of trees, or is the variance to not get rid of trees?
To get rid of.
To get rid of trees, okay.
Not all of them, but there's a couple that are getting removed. And then there's 2 of them that we are impacting, but we're not removing.
Okay, okay, and Forest Conservation has agreed with that?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? All right.
Okay, we're gonna roll right into concurrency management. So As everyone may be aware, pursuant to Chapter 156 of the County Code, once the department has determined that the residential development plan may be presented to the commission, the plan is reviewed for available threshold capacity. This involves testing various public facilities to ensure this isn't gonna have a negative impact. So, first we'll look at police. So without going through all the numbers, ultimately with the number of funded positions and the ratio of law enforcement positions to the Carroll County population at the end of February 2022 was 1.57. Based on a total of 255 positions, which would be those that have been sworn in and those that are funded, the ratio of law enforcement positions to Carroll County population as of the end of February 2022 was 1.46. Including the development projects in the pipeline along with the funded positions, the ratio will be over 1.3. And services are adequate if the projected ratio of sworn law enforcement officers to population is 1.3 per thousand. So, for this project, police services are deemed adequate. Next, we'll move on to schools. So the proposed subdivision is located in the Mechanicsville Elementary, West Middle, and Westminster High attendance areas. In accordance with the criteria established in Chapter 156, all schools are rated adequate for fiscal years 2022 to 2027. So, unless you want me to, I'm gonna gloss over. I'm not gonna go through all of
You
the
don't need to
numbers
go through all
for
the
this.
numbers. We got them in the report. I appreciate
Yeah, I was
it.
saying, I did last month, and it was a lot. So, but with all of them being adequate, I think it's.
And if
that
we have
speaks
questions,
for
we'll
itself.
ask you, but
Yeah.
we appreciate you
Okay.
summarizing.
Okay, great. So next on the list would be fire and emergency medical services. So the proposed subdivision is located in the Gamber Fire and Emergency Medical Services District. The most recent data from the Office of Public Safety reports that for the 2-year period of April 2020 to March 2022, late and no response statistical data indicates that of the first due total fire calls in the Gamber District, 1.54% were categorized as no responses and 4.62% as late and no responses. Of the first due EMS calls, 1% were categorized as no responses and 1% as late and no responses. So with that, Gamber is rated adequate for late and no response criteria for fire and EMS. With regard to fire call average response times for the same 2-year period, so April 2020 to March 2022, Gamber had an average response time of 8 minutes and 40 seconds, which is deemed approaching inadequate. With regard to emergency medical services, call average response time, Gamber had an average response time of 6 minutes and 37 seconds, which is deemed adequate. So services are rated adequate if when utilizing an average over the previous 24 months, response time is 8 minutes or less from the time of dispatch to on-scene arrival with adequate apparatus and personnel. Services are rated approaching inadequate if when utilizing the same time over 24 months, response time is between 8 minutes and 10 minutes from time of dispatch to on-scene arrival with adequate apparatus and personnel. Along with that, the primary route from the firehouse to the proposed development does not include travel over bridges that cannot adequately support fire and EMS apparatus, which is deemed adequate. And finally, Old Gamber Road is rated as adequate. So with that, with regard to a preliminary plan, I'm just gonna read this. I think I do it every single time, straight from the code. The code states, if a public facility or service is inadequate and a relief facility is planned in the 6-year CIP to address the inadequacy or mitigation is accepted by the county pursuant to Chapter 156.06B, or a public facility or service is approaching inadequate during the current CIP, the Planning Commission may conditionally approve the plan to proceed to the final plan stage and issue a tentative recordation schedule and tentative building permit reservation, subject to modification at the final plan stage. So currently, police, schools, roads, and EMS are considered inadequate, or are considered adequate. Ooh. Fire is considered approaching inadequate based solely on that dispatch time to arrival. Per the above referenced code, Planning Commission may conditionally approve the plan to proceed to the final stage and issue a tentative recordation schedule and tentative building permit reservation, subject to modifications at the final plan stage. So it should also be noted, I'm sure everybody's aware, as this progresses forward to get closer to getting final approval by the planning commission, it will be retested for all of these services as well. So pursuant to chapter 156, staff recommends that the planning commission conditionally approve the preliminary plan with the conditions as follows. Police, schools, roads, and EMS are considered adequate. Fire is considered approaching inadequate. The building permit reservation is for 6 lots in fiscal year 23, subject to modification at the final plat stage. The recordation schedule requires the plat to be recorded within 24 months of preliminary approval. And finally, the building permit reservation is allowed to roll over year after year until the sunset provision takes effect and the preliminary plan becomes void. So that's the end of my report. Happy to answer any questions, as I'm sure they are as well.
Do you all have anything to add to the presentation?
No, we don't, we'll ask, answer any questions you got.
Dennis, do you have a question?
No, it's pretty straightforward. So it's conditional because of the approaching inadequate.
That's exactly right.
So should that get better and the project gets done before 23, then it could be reversed and the lots could be done in 22 possibly.
It's very well possible. So with this reservation, as it's mentioned, it's subject to change as we move through the process. So depending on how quickly this moves through, it's very well possible.
Okay. Pete, do you have
I guess my only question is about when we put in these drives, these common drives and use in common, is, and it does go to EMS, right? You know, you pull down the wrong street, they should have pulled in the second drive, not the first one. They get in there and there's no radius back there where they can turn around, they have to back out. And so I think we really do our EMS people a disservice when we put in all these flag lots and drives that don't have a radius at the end of them. So I would ask the question, you know, I can't really tell, there's some circles on there. There really is no cul-de-sac at the end of this drive. Basically it's a driveway that pulls into the.
The only difference on these, okay, so first of all, 4-leaf drive is already built,
Okay.
already 12-foot wide. The difference is, when you have some of these shorter ones, okay, these homes are big homes with at least 2 to 3 car garages, okay? So for instance, on Clover Drive, when you come back that drive, those driveways are gonna be, 20 feet wide just to get to the houses. So when you talk about turning them around, there are driveways there, and most of these driveways are at least 20 feet wide anymore because most people are building, 2-car, 3-car garages. Even those houses that are built out there right now on the other side of 4-leaf have larger driveways in them. So when you get back to those ends and you're talking about them turning around to get back out, there are driveways off of the ends of those. Now, when you get to the longer use in commons that are like 1,000 feet, the houses are so far apart, I agree, that you don't. Here, when you get back to the end of Clover Leaf, you basically have 3 driveways coming right off the end of that thing. They're gonna be wide enough that they would have to back in. We're also, that's kind of where we were at.
And I'm just wondering, you're thinking the driveway itself will be 20 feet wide?
Most of these driveways are 20 feet wide. When the houses are sitting closer to these, they may be 10 or 12 going into where the house is, but when they get back closer to the house, very few people, if you talk about putting a truck in one of these, they're at least 30 feet deep and 20 feet wide at those houses. Some of them as wide as 30 if they put a 3-car garage in place, because they gotta be able to get into the garage.
Sure.
And we gotta be able to back out. So they do start to get a little bit larger on these larger houses. On the small houses, that are on small lots, you don't have that as much, but on these you do.
So I think, full disclosure, my husband built on 4-leaf, so they were smaller going in, but only when they got back to the garage area, they expanded.
They get bigger. Yeah.
So, but they're still probably like, I don't know, maybe 40 feet or so before you get back to that expanded
Right,
area.
but if you pulled in a piece of equipment and you went to back it out, depending on where you're at, you're gonna be backing in, you would be backing into one of the other driveways. But, but you're still gonna be, there's still ways of maneuvering back in there. And we do try to put, when you get into those longer driveways, when you're talking about 500, 600, 1,000 feet long, we've been trying to put those circles at the end of them, if possible, you know, but it is a balancing act between when do you do it and when don't you do it? When do you put a public road in that's only 300 feet long versus a Houston Common that's only 300 foot long, so.
Well, just, again,
Yeah.
I may have gotten hosed, but I've got a 3-car garage. My driveway's not 20 feet wide, there's no way. I mean, when you get back to the garage area, it is, but that length of, it's
Right,
just
it's
a
not
normal
going
driveway.
back, but when you get
It's a
back in
normal
there, it is
driveway
more,
width.
right. It all
I mean,
depends
you
on
can-
how close they
Yeah,
are.
you can play basketball in
Right.
the garage area, but, yeah, the driveway is a normal driveway.
And even 30 foot, you can't really turn a fire truck around very easily.
Not very easily.
No, I hesitate to chime in here, but I've backed a lot of fire engines over the last 47 years, and 12 feet is challenging. And I will also remind you that there are several homeowners that don't want you backing into their driveway because those driveways aren't rated for large equipment.
Yeah, they get through that.
Now, ambulances are one thing, although they're getting bigger every day too, but the consideration to put something in as you're talking about is certainly something I think that needs to be looked at. I'm not saying necessarily here, but in the future, because that's really important.
Yeah, I mean, your point's taken in terms of scale
Right.
of the, and you as the owner, I get it, you know, we've got 6 lots here. I don't know that the scale warrants it, but we're seeing a bunch of this, guys, and I just, you know, we need to start raising the flag here because, you know, we're gonna see nothing but decreased response times. Because we've all seen it where a fire truck pulls in and they're turning around and they just went to the wrong spot. And it's not that, you know, how do you go to the right spot when everything in this area is called Deer Park something, right? Okay, anyway, I'll shut up. I'm fine with it the way it is, but we gotta start raising the flag on this thing a little bit.
Yeah, I wonder if there's I mean, instead of it falling to us every time to say we want to change your plan to take this into account, it'd be helpful if the code actually dealt with this in a way that.
Well, I'll chime in. So within the development review manual, which was codified back in the early 2000s, there is provisions in there that say if your driveway exceeds 500 feet, you have to have a pull-off area and you have to have a turnaround somewhere either in the middle or at the end of the driveway. So being as how both of these fall under that 500-foot threshold, that's why they're not code required.
There you go.
All right, very good.
Sorry.
Don't know what that was.
Silly watch.
I am.
So I appreciate you looking up the code. Thank you very much.
You got it, Commissioner.
That's right, yeah.
Mike, Matt, did you have any other questions?
Just, since I'm the rookie here, the fire and emergency response, ratings are based on, is it in a radius, or is it, you know, company-wide, whatever their geography they cover is? Because I know Gamber, I live off of Deer Park. Gamber's only 3 miles away from this, so I would think the response time would be less than what their average is.
So that's a very good question. And from what I understand is each district has, a district that they're covering, but they may not always be the ones that are heading to this first. So depending on, and Commissioner, you may have better understanding of this, but depending on, what's happening elsewhere, it's possible that Gamber was called to another location and then somewhere local was called here.
Right.
And so you're getting response from people that aren't within that Gamber district that are driving to
Right.
this location. And that's being counted within this area.
And this,
I was gonna say, we're actually gonna have a concurrency management report as
Yep.
our next item, and that'll get at a lot of these questions. I know it doesn't help for this,
Okay.
but it'll
Great.
help you
Yeah.
understand a little bit
Great.
more about,
Good.
how those decisions are made.
awesome, we're still learning.
Yeah, absolutely.
And this property slopes I don't know if significantly, but, the decent amount from Old Gamber down to 91. And what is the landscape plan for, the property owners along 91?
So there is landscaping shown, for, I can't read that lot number, but for this lot right here, there's landscaping shown. And as mentioned, there was a landscape variance requested and approved, by the Department of Land and Resource Management regarding existing vegetation that's here for this lot. And so I'm gonna go back, so you can kind of see the existing vegetation here that was deemed adequate for the provisions of landscape, and then they were told to supplement in this open area here. And then, as mentioned, is a code required dirt berm that would be required, but they were granted immunity from that via that variance. And Linda can.
Well, in
certainly-
reality, the berm was, the house sits so much substantially higher than 91. However, for a noise perspective, the berm was, we were granted a variance to the berm, but we were told as a condition of the variance to beef up and double the amount of landscaping. So what we normally would have had to put in there for screening of trees and stuff like that, it's double. Now, as those trees get larger, obviously, that's gonna be more of a noise barrier and more of a shield, but we gotta give the chance for them to grow. So they'll be installed double what we normally would have had to have done if we had put a berm in place.
Is that just along 90, along 91, or is that also along the southern border between the adjacent property owner and the site?
No, just along 91, just along the backing of 91. And then Lot 5 has the new, brand new landscaping, and Lot 6 has the existing trees that are already in place, that we're using, because we're not disturbing any of those trees in the construction. So it was, don't take out the trees, and plus those trees kind of sit a little bit on top of it, a little bit up a hill, more than the ones on Lot 5. So we're using the existing trees.
Are 5 and 6 the lots that are
Yes, they are.
adjacent to the
Mhm.
site? Yeah.
Yeah, so this would be 6 here,
Yes.
and then this would be 5
Yes.
over here.
When we were here before, the minutes reflect that Mr. Huff, not this Mr. Huff,
The other one.
asked for the landscaping along the southern property line to screen between the two different uses to be addressed more thoroughly in the preliminary plan, which I read to mean between this site and the adjacent property to the south.
Commercial property.
Commercial property, exactly.
Yeah, there is a house there, though.
There's a house.
That's,
They built their house there.
right.
Yeah. So the house has been constructed on that commercial piece. There's a private house that sits right there. Those trees that are already there that you see, we're not really intending to impact those trees.
So they're gonna remain.
They're gonna remain. As much as it's on us. So they've torn a couple of the trees down, along there that's on them.
Yeah, they look a little sparse in some
It does
spots.
now, but when you look at them in the field, it looks, like they're all deciduous trees along there.
Any other questions from here? Are there any members of the public that wish to comment on this plan? All right, hearing none, then the chair would be happy to entertain a motion pursuant to chapter 155 regarding approval of the preliminary plan, subject to the 7 conditions listed in the staff report, if you're so inclined.
Nobody wants to take a stab. Okay. Let me find it.
Page 3.
I've got it.
Okay.
You want me to do it? I'll move that we approve the site plan as submitted pursuant to the 7 stipulations, pursuant to chapter 155 and the 7 stipulations submitted by staff.
I'll second.
All right, so we have a motion to approve pursuant to chapter 155, subject to the 7 conditions listed in the staff report, and we have a second to that. Is there any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed or abstaining? All right, that will be unanimously approved. And is there a motion regarding pursuant to chapter 156?
I'll move that we approve the development review pursuant to chapter 156 and the 4 stipulations submitted to staff.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion to approve the preliminary plan pursuant to chapter 156, subject to the 4 conditions set forth in the staff report, and we have a second. Is there any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed or abstaining? It is unanimously approved. Thank you. Good luck.
Thank you.
All right, we will move on to item 11, which is the concurrency management presentation. Madam Secretary, I'm looking at where we might have action items, because we have a member who has to leave by 11:30. I think we'll be done by 11:30, but I just want to make sure we don't end up without a quorum.
The only other action item we have is
Tawnytown
item 14, Tawnytown annexation. We need a planning commission recommendation to forward to the Board of County Commissioners with regard to the zoning waiver that is requested as part of this annexation.
Is it your best guess that we'll have that done within the hour?
Probably not.
So maybe we should move to amend the agenda, to change up the items. I know it's a bit of an audible for the staff, but
Okay.
if we're able to, could we move up item 14 to make it our next item? Is that possible?
Certainly, but give me a minute to get staff down here.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, why don't we take 5 minutes?
Okay.
Does that give you enough time?
Yeah, that's fine, yeah, we're ready, we just have to bring everyone
Okay,
down.
so we'll take a 5-minute recess, that way you can come down. I appreciate your flexibility on this, and then we'll reconvene in 5 minutes. Thank you. convene the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting of April 19th, 2022. And prior to the recess, we were talking about possibly amending our agenda, and it seems prudent that perhaps we ought to entertain a motion to actually amend the agenda.
I will move that we amend the agenda for our April 19th meeting, which we're doing right now, and move item number 14 above item number 11, and that we delete the recess, because we just had a recess at 12.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion to move 14 ahead of 11, get rid of the recess, which was item 12. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Very good. The agenda is so amended. And with that, we will now move to the Tawnytown annexation Sewell property. Thank you for your flexibility in
Yeah, no problem.
accommodating the timeline. And we will turn it over to you.
So, thank you all for getting this on the agenda. I know this was part of the revisions for today. This is a very interesting annexation. Hannah did a great job doing a lot of research for Tawnytown. You'll see why she goes through her presentation. And then I believe Clark Schaefer, who's representing the Sewells, is here today. Unfortunately, the town was supposed to be, or City of Tawnytown was supposed to be here. So hopefully they'll be able to participate as we move forward in this process.
My guess is they tried to time it based on the agenda, and but hopefully they'll roll in here soon.
Okay.
And this agenda item is also before the commissioners on Thursday, and the town is well aware and will be there for that meeting as well. So with that, I'm gonna have Hannah go through the presentation on the annexation, number 48, Sewell property.
Thank
Yes,
you.
so we are meeting with the commissioners on Thursday and then as well as next Thursday. So the city will have 2 opportunities, if not today, to speak. So as we said, we are here to talk about the Sewell property annexation into the city of Tawnytown. We are here for discussion with you all and then a recommendation on the zoning waiver to the Board of County Commissioners. So a little about the property. We are, there's a proposed annexation of approximately 126 acres. The way it is oriented, we have Maryland 140 to the south of the annexation area, and then we have Harney Road, which splits the annexation area and runs north-south. The annexation area is split, as I said, between the west annexation and the east annexation. The west annexation is approximately 115 acres on the west side of Harney Road, and then we have the east annexation on the east side of Harney Road. The west annexation is this big parcel, as I said, approximately 115 acres, and then approximately 10 acres is this parcel here. So this plat was provided by the city of Tawnytown. Again, the annexation area, if you're able to see the light blue highlight, that is the annexation area. And then we have the county in the red and municipality in the blue. Again, we have Maryland 140 to the south and then Harney Road splitting the annexation. Here we have the orientation of the relation to the corporate limits of Tawnytown. We are in the northwest quadrant of the corporate limits. We have the corporate limits in the red hashing and the annexation area in the blue, and the growth area boundary in the black and gold border. Here is an aerial view of the annexation area. Again, the annexation area is in blue. It is improved on the west annexation with dwellings and agricultural buildings. The east annexation area of the 10 acres is completely unimproved. We have the growth area boundary. You can see it's kind of funky at the top. The city is aware that there is parts of the annexation area that is not in the growth area. I'm assuming that the growth area boundary is a little funky because it follows a stream that's on the northern part of the property. And moving on to zoning, the entire 126 acres of the annexation area is zoned agricultural with the county. The petitioners, which is the city of Tawnytown, are requesting R10,000 zoning. So since we are going from approximately 1 dwelling unit per 20 acres to 4.3 dwelling units per acre of under the R10,000, a zoning waiver is required and was requested. Moving on to designated land use, I'm gonna split it into the west annexation and the east annexation again. We have conservation in the green, approximately 39 acres, and then the medium density residential, which is approximately 77 acres. So as I said, the requested zoning is R10,000. This zoning request is not consistent with what these land use designations are. Looking at the east annexation, we have the suburban residential, which is consistent with the requested zoning of R10,000. So just to recap, the west annexation is not going to be consistent with what they have in their community comprehensive plan. So moving on to water and sewer, it is currently in the long range for both water and sewer. The city is aware that they are under some capacity issues for both water and sewer. These numbers are taken from the Carroll County Water and Sewer Master Plan, and the future demand is based on the 10-year projection. So this first number is based on the existing and priority water and sewer categories. So as I said, the property is in long range, so it is not being included in these gallons per day and capacity numbers. So currently, without including the annexation demand, they are at 88% capacity for water and 83% capacity for sewer. The MDE, or Maryland Department of Environment, prefers that all systems for both water and sewer be under 80%. So for agency comments, we have not received anything yet from Maryland Department of Planning. We are hoping to have their comments for the county commissioners on Thursday. We have received comments from the Carroll County Department of Public Works and the Bureau of Engineering, and they are requiring that Harney Road from Maryland 140 to the northern part of the annexation area be included in the annexation. So this means the road would be owned and maintained by the city of Tawnytown. So putting that in perspective, Department of Public Works and Engineering is requiring that this road be included in the annexation. So from this northern point down to the municipality. This itself creates an issue for the annexation. Maryland State Code, or the annotated code, states that no enclave can be made by an annexation area. An enclave would be made if if the road would be included in the annexation, because this county land would be completely surrounded on all sides by municipality. Like, you wouldn't have this access of Harney Road any longer if it was included in the municipality. So in conclusion, as we said, we are presenting to the county commissioners on the 21st, this Thursday. At this point, we are not recommending support of this annexation and the zoning waiver. To recap, the requested zoning of R10,000 is inconsistent with the land use designations in their community comprehensive plan. The high-density residential requested zoning will not be supported by the water and sewer infrastructure currently as it stands in the city. And annexing Harney Road, like Department of Public Works and Engineering is requiring, would create an illegal enclave per Maryland annotated code. So that's a lot.
No, got it.
Very good. Does that conclude your presentation?
Yes, yeah.
All right. Mr. Schaefer?
Thank you. Note for the record that I just now was handed the staff report, so didn't really have a preview, although I asked for one yesterday. So I have a few comments, as you can imagine. First, the assertion that this is not consistent with the master plan is questionable. And I'm going to use the word, it's pretty consistent with the master plan. And the reason is, if you saw that zoning map, can you put that up there again, or that master plan map? You see that first of all, well, let me say, first of all, this is an annexation of a farm that has been talked about in Tawnytown for about 10 years. It's the Sewell Christmas Tree Farm. is what it's known as. And the town has considered annexing this off and on for 10 years. The Sewells have owned it for those periods of time. About a year or two ago, the Sewells approached Tawnytown again, and Tawnytown said, yes, we think now is the time. And the town, I think it's important to note, has initiated this resolution to annex. In other words, they have proposed a resolution, adopted it at a council meeting. And that doesn't mean they're committed to annexing. They're gonna have a public hearing in May, and they're gonna hear from Carroll County and the Maryland Department of Planning, and everybody else before they make their final decision. In fact, what is proposed, and there's an annexation agreement in place with the town that contemplates an age-restricted development on this property that has been concept plan shown. About no more than 340 units, 85 duplex, and I think it's 85 or 140 singles. But they'll be clustered on that medium-density residential portion. And by the way, the development is all on the west side. The east side is not proposed for development this time. The conservation zone land will be largely or entirely open space that will be offered to the town if they want it for a park, or more likely used as open space to support the age-restricted development. The reason I say that, as it's pointed out, medium-density residential is the land use designation for the bulk of this property right now. That's roughly R20, not R10. Okay, R10 is considered higher density for obvious reasons. But Tawnytown has a community village zoning category that it's explicitly understood that this development will ask to be developed under that rubric. And that is closer to the medium density design for this thing, because it will cluster the development and will not allow any development on the bulk of the property. I'm gonna miss this in the report, but I don't know that I did. And it's a very, I think a key, important point, is that this annexation, if approved and if the development takes place, will involve the construction of a collector road shown on the Tawnytown master plan for many, many years, running across the entire property, or a good piece of the property. The intention is eventually it'll connect up to 140 in future development. That collector road is a major reason why Tawnytown thinks this might make some sense. It will be constructed and paid for by the developer to collector road standards as we go through this. The statement in the staff report, I mean, I don't know whether this is semantic or not, but to the effect that some county department is, quote, requiring, end quote, that Harney Road be annexed as part of this development, is simply not accurate. Well, it's simply, they can't require it, okay? They can recommend it. They can suggest that it makes some sense. In fact, and we've discussed this with Tawnytown from day one, the maintenance, upkeep, ownership, etc. of public roads is always an issue in annexations for obvious reasons. Every annexation involves taking county property that presumably has some road service and annexing it to a municipality. It is common and customary for the municipalities to discuss these matters with the county and to make arrangements. The arrangement that probably, I would suggest will happen in this case is that the town will probably be at the county's request/requirement, that the town will maintain Harney Road, that portion of it. Not that it has to be annexed. There's plenty of roads out there that are in, 140 running through the middle of Tawnytown is not owned by Tawnytown, it's owned by the state of Maryland. There's plenty of roads out there that have these arrangements made. So, and by the by, this is I mean, it's been about literally 10 years, but this is a 5, 7, 10-year project to get this through. In terms of the water and sewer, yes, it's true. Right now, Tawnytown does not have capacity to serve this. That's explicitly understood. It's addressed in the annexation agreement that Tawnytown believes that they will be able to increase their water and their sewer capacity. They have an I&I study. I don't know that you need the details now or want them, but Tawnytown believes that it is likely that they will be able to achieve capacity to service this development. And they're not unsophisticated. They've looked at that. They've looked at the specific number of units that could go in here and how they could do it. They know they would have to amend their water and sewer master plan, which, as you know, goes through a process with the Maryland Department of Planning. And if and only if that occurs, this development will go forward. If that doesn't occur, and this is a standard track for development, especially for a larger one. You know, you start the early parts, and then you see if capacity's there. Tawnytown has in place an adequate facilities ordinance that talks about these capacities. And what it says is, if those things don't exist, your development doesn't go through. You're familiar with that. You just did your concurrency management thing for subdivision. Same thing there. So it's not like this is an that recommending this annexation and allowing it to occur would create any evils. I'm not seeing reasons. I mean, I guess the reasons I'm seeing that the staff's recommending against it are, it's not consistent with the master plan. Okay, I mean, I think it pretty much is. That Harney Road has to be annexed, which it doesn't, clearly. And by the way, from day one, staff thought this was an enclave. Turned out they were wrong. There are. I'm not hearing any. I'm not discerning any really reasons why this is against the public health, safety, and welfare. Tawnytown would like to annex it, or we think they do. They've moved ahead this far. They are well aware of the facilities they need to have in place to do so. They view the development as a positive development for the town. Support their Main Street. They apparently have been fairly happy with the development on the other side of town, the Carol Vista development, that was retirement. And I would argue to you that there's no real reason why the county would view this as an evil to the county or to the town or to the citizens of Carroll County. This is something that the town should be allowed to go forward with, and again, go through the long process. So we would appreciate your favorable consideration and request your recommendation to the commissioners that they, well, I guess approve the annexation is not quite the right terminology, but we need a waiver because the agricultural zoning that's currently there, we're way over that. So that's why we need the waiver. Now, we've already heard that it's master plan. I mean, if I was in here with a master plan ag land, you know, that was land use designated agricultural, not medium density residential. But it's obvious, this piece has always been envisioned, that master plan designation tells you that this piece has always been envisioned for a fairly significant residential development, for, I think, obvious reasons. It completes the Collector Street, it adds to Tawny Town's residential housing base, and they're in favor of it. So, appreciate your consideration. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Schaefer. I have just a couple questions, and then I'll be glad to turn it over to my colleagues. The one question is, maybe it's for Ms. Weber. You had mentioned that this proposed annexation is within the designated growth area. Is that the county's designated growth area, or it's the town's designated growth area, right? The town?
It's their municipal growth area, which is designated jointly with the town and the county. And it's just the northern portion. Again, I think there was a boundary where, when the boundary was drawn, they used the river feature as opposed to the property boundary.
Okay.
So, and that's a minimal issue. That's not really a cause to.
Yeah,
if
the
it was
city's aware of it
outside,
too.
yeah, if it was outside the municipal growth area, those annexations need to be thought of in a different way, and municipal growth area boundaries need to be established prior to that.
And then, Mr. Shaver, just a couple questions for you. I certainly take your point that the way this is envisioned to be developed, you were saying looks pretty consistent with the master plan. But the technical information, I think, is that it would be R10,000. Is R10, in your view, is R10,000 consistent with the master plan?
In my view, it is, especially when coupled with the fact that the community village process will be used to develop it. And I think if you see I don't have it in front of me, but the Tawny Town prepared a statement to send to the Maryland Department of Planning in which they talked about the consistency or lack thereof. And they're okay with that consistency.
So their view, as far as you understand it, their view is that this would be consistent with the master plan?
I don't want to put those words in their mouth, but I do know that they are aware that R10 does not match up with medium density, okay? I also know that they're aware that their community village requires certain densities that, or allows densities that I think they view as being consistent with that, generally with that designation.
And so as Mr. Schaefer said too, we are waiting for, as part of our process, we send it to those reviewing agencies, and we're still waiting to hear back from Maryland Department of Planning. When this was originally submitted, we did work with Maryland Department of Planning ahead of time. The information that we were given was more in terms of it was an enclave. Upon further review with a different plat, the determination from our legal staff was that it was not an enclave after we reviewed some more details. So it is not a legal enclave. And as far as the requirement goes, Mr. Schaefer's correct. We can't require the road be annexed in, but we didn't want to change the words from our Public Works Department as part of their memo to us. So that was what they wanted to see happen with the roadway, Harmony Road.
Okay. And certainly reading the staff report, it seems like the enclave issue was important. If it's, at least I read it as that was a concern. It creates an enclave, but it sounds like it doesn't create an enclave.
Not a legal enclave, but, from our perspective, it's completely surrounded.
Yeah, absolutely.
By the municipality. The only thing that is not making it completely surrounding, there is an opening, is Harney Road not being annexed into the town. So that was our concern, we have so many annexations that have been like this in the past, especially in the Hampstead, Manchester area. We have these little pockets, and it can be problematic from especially a public works maintenance perspective, as well as we have the opposite, which I would argue is probably is almost a leapfrog annexation. It's not real property to real property, where we have long strings of roadway connecting annexed land into a corporate limit. So, from looking at it from that perspective, yes, is it technically a legal enclave? No, it is not. But is it something that, by looking at it, it's surrounded? And that's the evidence we have to go on and what we were looking at. And this is just our recommendation from our planning perspective of our thoughts on whether this is an appropriate annexation or not.
Yeah, Mr. Schaefer?
Let's be careful here not to fall into the trap of using the word enclave and saying, end of story. Let's do what we should do, which is, let's look at what, if any, evils or negative consequences are created by this configuration. Okay, because that's what the enclave rule is designed to do. It's designed to prevent these evil consequences, such as, hi, I live in one of the 68 lots that's surrounded by the city of Tawnytown. I want somebody out here now to correct my zoning or to look. No, ma'am, you're in the county. You know, or the snowplow is driving along and goes, up. Let me see, I'm at mile marker 2, I better pick up the plow. I'm no longer in Tawnytown. You know, I'm no longer in Carroll. Those, and the confusion of, hi, police, get out of here. You're calling the wrong police department. Those are the evils now, what do we got here? We got a farmette that's not quite surrounded, but that has a lot of county property around it. And by the way, if you were to look at municipal boundaries around the county, and I invite you to do so in your spare time, you will see a lot of, if not some, almost identical to this. Other ones, crazy. It's just an issue when you got municipalities. You know, Maggie's is in the city and Pritz is out of the city here. Now, I know that because I've done zoning work up here, and then across the street is the medical center's in. You know, the next door up the street and out. I ask you to not just go, well, enclave, we're not doing it. I ask you to say, first of all, it's not a legal enclave. We now know, even though planning told the Department of Planning it was an enclave, and they stopped reviewing it. But it's not. And secondly, I'd be singing a different tune, you know, if this was 60 lots in the middle of there, or even 10 parcels or 5 parcels. This is one farmette. Everybody's, frankly, this is probably going to be one of the most recognizable boundaries in the town by the time this is over, where it is there. So I think these are problems that are inherent. Should they prevent the, and then the question is, okay, yeah, it's not clean, but is that a reason to say, Tony, you can't do this major thing that's pretty much consistent with your master plan? It's always been viewed for growth. It's in the growth boundary. I mean, we're not coming in here asking for, you know, we're going 6 miles out of Harney Road and we want to do one of these strip things where this hits on many of the cylinders. This makes sense from a lot of growth perspectives. It will be required to develop responsibly because there's adequate facilities ordinances in place. And it will not go through unless there is water, sewer, etc. Now, I'm almost ready to shut up because I know I've talked too much, but you know, it's one thing to talk about the development itself, and it's another thing to talk about the land and its zoning. If this gets annexed, all that happens at that point in time is it's in the city and it's zoned the way we proposed it. That's what has occurred. Only if many, many other parameters and reviews are met, adequate facilities, subdivision regulations, health department regulations, everything else, does one house get built on there. So it's not like if the county allows this to go through or recommends that it goes through and gives the waiver, it's not like you're approving a 300-400 unit development.
So I have just a couple of questions I want to click through. Number one, the land that is sort of surrounded but technically not surrounded, is there a way to make that part of the annexation as well, so you get rid of that issue completely?
That's an excellent question. It always comes up in annexations, and it, meaning the municipality, you come in with the annexation, and the municipality says to you, bring those 6 properties in too, because that would be better. Now, this is a little different. You go out and knock on the 6 doors, and they go, oh, yeah? So you want me to pay municipal taxes and annex in, and you'll pay for the annexation? No, I'm not interested. I don't think I'm getting the services. I'm not paying extra taxes. I'm happy with the county sheriff coming out here instead of the Manchester Police Department.
But do we know if that's been done?
Yeah,
as it relates to this?
yes, we do. It's in the background. That property in the middle was owned by a guy named Dennis Harner for many, many years, and he lived there, and it was a farmette. It was recently bought by another person. I don't even know if that person lives there, but it's a single-family farmette. We do know that that person's aware. We know that he's talked to Tawnytown about it. We know that he's called up my client, NVR, and said, how about buying it? Or let's, and our position has been all along, we're not interested in buying it, but it's been, look, we don't have anything against you. Annex in. You want to annex in? But before you annex in, Mr. Property Owner, know that we have spent years and tens of thousands of dollars getting concept plans done, and you just don't walk into Tawnytown and go, how about annexing my property and zoning it at R10? You got to say, here's my plan, and that costs money. So, all I can
maybe,
say
but
is
not
that
yet.
right now, that's not in the cards, and but I won't guarantee it, but that property will annex in. It's very valuable. It's ripe to be zoned for some residential. By the way, that property, I think, would complete the connection of the collector road to 140. So there's an incentive for Tawnytown to go, you want to annex in? How many units are you going to put out there? Okay, you're going to complete the collector road? But right now, that is not happening, and we are, we do not want that to be used as a wench against us to prevent our annexation.
So if I could just, a couple things with this is a little bit different than some of the annexations that we have brought forward to you all in the past. Typically, annexations are initiated by the property owner, where the property owner says, I want to come into you, town, and what do we need to do that? This was a different type of annexation. The town is initiating this particular annexation to come into the corporate limits. To move forward with the other properties too, they can be forcibly moved in as long as 25% of the properties or and the value of the properties want to come in. Then the other ones that don't want to be a part of the annexation would have to come in as well. Does that make sense? So
Conceptually, I guess.
yeah, so that is how the law is written, and so conceivably everyone would have to come in south of this property. So everything in the southern road portion in between surrounded by the
Well, that's one guy.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, you would need 25% of the assessed value and then 25% of the registered voters' consent.
Thank you. Yeah.
So my overriding, I guess, concern is, and I'm sorry to dominate this, but just,
That's all right.
is this, why, I guess my question is, why is this not premature? One of the issues is no public water, public sewer. We might have public water, might have public sewer, don't have capacity now, but might have capacity in the future. Why don't we wait and see? Secondly, we've got this property owner that's surrounded, not technically an enclave, but maybe they become part of the annexation, maybe they don't. Conversations are gonna be had. Why not let those conversations happen? Why does this need to happen now? Why couldn't we wait until some of those things develop and then make a more informed decision?
Because, you could, obviously, but you don't know when that's gonna occur, and this is a step-by-step process. And it's over a if we waited till then, we would be another year or two away from getting that water and sewer. And because it takes a year, to get through this whole process. And meantime, there's no mechanism that I know of to reserve the water and sewer, so we might lose it when they get it. If it's in and they know what it's zoned, Tonytown can more intelligently request an amendment to their water and sewer master plan, knowing exactly what they're asking for, because they already have it. The water stuff involves recharge areas, and that can be a moving target, because the county, I mean, I'm getting into the weeds here a little bit, but it's interesting. The county has taken in recent years to putting clauses in their ag preservation easements, in the easements they buy, that say you can use it for water recharge. And that has the potential, in given situations, to free up a lot more water to be sucked out of the ground by the Tonytown wells. Thus, the hope, and more than a hope, I mean, they're optimistic that they can free up the water. The sewer, the wastewater treatment plant, they've done an I&I study. They've started an infill and infiltration study where they look for stormwater that's getting into their system. They fixed, and I'm not going to give you the numbers, but Jim Weeprecht, the Tonytown town manager, their first effort, and they try to cherry pick, they try to pick the best places to begin with. Their first effort yielded, I think they're waiting to get the full numbers with the storms, like thousands and thousands and thousands of gallons of extra capacity, because they plugged some holes where, well, you know the deal is, when it rains, we treat 1 million gallons of wastewater, but we're really only generating 450,000 gallons of wastewater, and that's because your pipes are leaking. So they think they have the capacity. This is the first step. I want to make one point on waiver, which I think is important, and that's this. The only thing we need from the county here, the only thing Tonytown needs from the county is a waiver. They don't need permission to annex. If they don't get the waiver, they can't zone the property to R10 for 5 years. Okay, that's the hammer the county has here. And I'll tell you frankly right now, if they don't give the waiver, it'll kill the NVR deal. So, I mean, you do have the county in fact has a lot of power. Whether Tonytown wants to go ahead and wait 5 years, I don't know. See if another development comes in that time. Frankly, it's 5 years before we can probably build anyway. But.
And so let me ask you a process question. So to deal with my issue of whether this is premature or not, one option is you just wait some period of time, you wait a year to maybe some of these unanswered questions get answered, and that helps the process. How does that compare to, suppose this goes forward and ultimately we recommend that it not be approved and the county commissioners agree and they don't approve it? What does that do to the process and the timing? I mean, is it dead in the water
It
then, or
delays
can
it
you
for
rescind?
5 years. It delays it for 5 years. And you know, these are important, but I know they're not legally important, but they're practically important. Ronnie and Lori Sewell have run a Christmas tree farm on that property for long enough, in their opinion. And they're elderly, or you know, they're not getting any younger. Let's just put it that way. Mm-hmm. And they've been in there for 10 years, talking to Tonytown. So, from a practical standpoint, it would ruin that plan. Mm-hmm. It would also simply delay it 5 years. And even after the 5 years, we'd still be subject to the same exact things that we'd have to go through now.
But we might have better information.
Maybe the water and sewer plant had been there. Maybe Tonytown could develop it. Maybe. By the way, it hadn't been brought up here, but the intersection of Harney and 140 will also have to be dealt with and improved as part of this development. There's another public infrastructure in addition to the collector road that would get done. And by the way, that collector road would also be delayed for 5 years or whatever, assuming it's needed for Tonytown's transportation structure.
So let me challenge you with one last thing, and I'm sorry to take up so much time, but because this is something I need to work through, and I want to get your input on it. as I understand your argument, it is that this is technically not an enclave and we shouldn't be bothered with that because it's not doesn't meet the technical requirements of an enclave. But one of the other guiding principles we have is this consistent with the master plan? And your argument there is, well, technically, don't worry about technically, mostly it's consistent. It seems to, the internal struggle I'm having with your argument is, it's we're allowed to look at whether the technical definition of an enclave is met, and it's not, so don't worry about it, but don't take a technical view of whether there's compliance with the master plan. Help me with that, if you would.
Okay. Master plans are just that, they're guides. They are built in, there is some built-in flexibility there. Unlike the zoning ordinance, where once you're R10, you comply with the R10. The master plans explicitly say they're guides for future development. And that's what they're intended to be. And that's what Tonytown looked at here. In fact, I'm not even sure of this, but if I were to legally get involved in one of these things, I would say, you're telling me medium density residential equals R20, but why didn't you just say R20 in your master plan? I mean, you looked at medium density residential. You used terms like that because you knew that we needed to be somewhat flexible. And I'll reiterate my argument, which is under certain cluster provisions in PUD provisions in zoning ordinances, you can achieve what is substantially similar to a medium density residential with an R10 zone. And sometimes you need that R10 zone to do it, to get the cluster. I don't have the figures. Do you have the per acre figures, Marty? Or the density per acre, like here? You could play, it's not a game, it's actually an interesting enterprise. You could take 340 units, divide it by the acreage, and get a density per acre.
Right.
And I don't know if you saw up there, but if they had the density per acre at R10 is 4.3 or something, 4.3 units per acre. We're not getting anywhere near there. Do the math, 115 times 4, that's 460 units, right?
I think Marty gave you an answer or something. He's doing that.
So, at R10 on 115, we're 468 units.
Okay.
We're not 460. How much?
2.95?
2.95 on the 115 acres on the one side. If you use the entire property, it'd be 2.69.
Yeah, so if you do that, we're pretty consistent with what I think people view as medium density per
And in
acre.
your view, that would be more consistent with the
That would
master
be
plan?
more consistent, and I'm trying to see how Jim Woodbridge did it.
Just keep in mind, the zoning allows for more, so we have to go by what the land use designation of
Right.
that corresponding zoning, because no plan has been submitted yet, because it's not in corporate limits.
Right.
Let me relieve you for a second. Because all your questions are dead on, because, and Ms. Weber, I would like to ask a question, and I don't mean to put you on the spot, but, and again, the fact that the town is asking for this and is initiating this, that all makes a lot of sense. But I'm having issues with, it looks like a duck, it quacks like a duck, it's got webbed feet like a duck, water rolls off its back, but it's not, it's a waterfowl instead, and we're just not gonna call it a duck. Cause it looks like an enclave. I mean, I get the technical aspect of it, and I'm not saying we should not do it because of that, but when we end up with this patchwork of properties that are incorporated and properties that aren't, I do think we open ourselves up for issues, in terms of who is maintaining roads, who is providing emergency service, who is minding the store, so to speak. So I do think those are issues. Having said, is there anything in terms of current property owners who are in the sewer and water service area? Is there anything about this that adversely affects current property owners that we don't know? I mean, in terms of people who, permits that could be brought forward people who are expecting capacity, that sort of thing? Is this even something we should be
So-
concerned about?
We can't speak for the town. The town has their own system. They run and operate their own
Right.
system. All we do is we help forward when an amendment comes forward with the water and sewer master plan.
Mhm.
They have to give us the information to justify.
Okay.
And then we, the county, have to either support it if the numbers work out, and that's what puts us, in the mix, so to speak, is
Mhm.
that we, the county, have to put it forward. So by putting it forward, we're endorsing what they're saying that they have. And then MDE makes the final approval, but we can't, I don't think it's fair for us to be able to answer
No,
what's
yeah,
happening
I
in
was
the
just
portfolio
curious.
I can
limits.
answer it, absolutely not. The answer is absolutely not. It does not affect anybody that's currently there
Okay.
by putting this in. And in fact, I can go further and say that if and when Tawnytown asks to amend its water and sewer master plan to include this property in it, that plan will have to be supported by data that shows they have the capacity to serve this property.
Okay.
And sort of to shed some more light on that aspect, with the water and sewer master plan, as Hannah showed before, water-wise, they're at 88% capacity today. And with working with the town or the city, they only have two areas. They have existing and they have priority. And the properties you'll see that are in priority are the remainder of Meadowbrook and the remainder of Meads, Each Crossing, and then a couple of other areas for commercial, industrial, and maybe some small infill.
Mhm.
They have nothing whatsoever in future.
Okay.
This is a long range, again, so none of this estimated demand is even calculated for their plan.
Okay.
So they're at 88% capacity for water, 83% capacity for sewer. Again, we're basing our numbers off of our 10,000. Obviously, they're looking to do less than the 4.5 units per acre. I just did a basic 400 units. That's less than 4.5. I mean, it could be a little bit more. But with that being said, this could potentially add 100,000 gallons of water and sewer that is not accounted for out of it. That's not even being thought of in their water and sewer master plan, which is the guiding principle of when it comes to development.
So what's the harm, what's the negative if this is annexed and it doesn't get, and the water and
I
sewer
was about
plan
to ask that question.
can't be, they can't amend it? What's the harm?
Well, bringing this in is gonna show that they're potentially, because they would then have to bring this into the water and sewer master plan, whether it's future, because they realize, well, we don't have it right now, priority.
They're not gonna have to.
But
Believe me, if they had to, I'd be making a lot of money as a lawyer going, you got me in your water and sewer master plan? Give me the water today, or I'm fine. No, you don't. Now, it does say that Tawnytown, as a long-range project, is looking to provide water and sewer to this project, which is exactly what the case is. They believe they wouldn't be doing, they wouldn't be doing this. They believe that in time, and in the relatively near future, they're gonna be able to convince the state of Maryland, and it's there, and by the way, this isn't Hampstead, this isn't Eldersburg, this is Tawnytown's system. I could get it if I was in Eldersburg, and said, this is gonna leave the county with a real problem here, no, it's not, so.
One clarification for me, the town of Tawnytown, have they officially I know they've initiated the process, but have they officially indicated that they are in fact in favor and are supporting this annexation?
Well,
Or again, is that something that isn't,
Not
we're not
officially,
quite there?
because they really, they introduced the resolution, they voted and talked about it and introduced, so yes, I would say yes, that's an official, but they've gotta have a public hearing, and they can't really decide or state they're gonna do it until they hear the public hearing. For all we know, a neighbor comes out and goes, wait a minute, you don't even own that piece of ground, I own it, so they can't do it officially. I have found a paragraph in Tawnytown's report to the annexation report on the master plan, if I may.
Sure.
Current land use is agricultural, as is the current zoning per Carroll County zoning map. The proposed residential and open space use of the property is generally consistent with the comprehensive plan for the city of Tawnytown and environs. A zoning designation of R10,000 has been requested by the owner. The comp plan designates land uses of suburban residential, medium-density residential, and conservation for the property. To remain fully consistent with the comprehensive plan, I said pretty consistent, the zoning upon annexation would be a combination of R10, R20, and open space. Thus, a zoning waiver will be necessary to develop the property within 5 years of annexation under the requested R10,000 designation.
So why not ask for R20,000 instead of R10? Wouldn't that
We
help?
couldn't fit we couldn't get the number of units and cluster them under the community village. We looked at, we're gonna go under community village.
It'd be 200 units.
Yeah. We, in order to get the number of units that would make this viable, Marty looked at it and we did a concept plan, showed how the collector road could come through, the alignment of it, went to Tawny Town and said, you sure you want this collector road? Because we didn't think they'd build the other sections of it. And they said, well, we do want it. You know, you build it. So we go, okay, that's part of the plan.
So let me interrupt you, Mr. Schaefer, because we've got a time constraint,
Sure.
because one of our members has to leave now, and we want to make sure we have an opportunity. And I've dominated the conversation. I apologize to my colleagues here, so feel free to ask whatever questions you would like.
So it's in the priority area or the designated growth area?
It's in the municipal growth area,
Right.
meaning, and that is the town's ultimate corporate limits that they would like to see.
Okay.
And nothing, even developing it, moving forward with this part of it, they can't do actual build until they have water and sewer, correct? So if it's 5 years, 10 years, they just simply have the zoning in place.
By the way, we're led to believe it two-ish, 2 to 3 years, they're gonna solve the problem. Now, that's a,
But it's the town's problem to solve.
Right.
Not the county.
That's,
Yeah. My question would be, the piece that's already annexed into town, I see on here is already R10,000, part of it. And C2, the piece to the north, that touches the property. Is that already figured in their numbers for their sewer and water?
Yes.
And that's currently, that's not built out now, correct?
Yeah, I mean, that one's, but it's still a long range. And again, the long range is a planning tool
Yeah.
to, when they realize we don't have the capacity. But we, sooner or later, this may get annexed in, it's a planning tool. So, these properties coming in, and like most places, it's first come, first served. So, if for some reason all of a sudden the town looks at it and they bring everybody in, and they realize, okay, we have recouped, and when it comes to the I&I, they're not gaining capacity, just to be clear. They're recouping capacity. Their capacity is set at 1.1 million gallons. So they're not all of a sudden getting, oh, we have 300,000 gallons more capacity. You're actually recouping, you're not treating groundwater anymore, so you're not gaining capacity, so that's sure that's not.
it's the same, that's the exact same effect for any project, right? Either you've got sewer capacity or you don't. I mean, I just wanna make
No,
that clear.
What I'm
They're
getting
not-
at is you were saying I&I is increasing capacity, which is incorrect.
Okay. In other words, they're not redoing their wastewater treatment plant in order to get a permit to allow them to put more water through it.
And-
Rather, they're fixing leaks that allow them to put more water through it with its existing capacity.
Right, and everything in existing and priority is already accounted for in those numbers. The long range is not accounted for, so those numbers aren't accounted for in the current plant's capacity. So a capacity enhancing project would need to occur to bring those into the system.
By the town.
And it's a
Correct, by the town.
It's a town issue. It's a town issue.
And then with the water aspect, yes, recharge, they have a well that could definitely, more than likely, handle this project and other projects coming in. However, they do not have the recharge right now to not relieve, but to realize the total amount.
Yeah, there's a fairly proficient well on this property right now, on the Sewell property.
Okay.
And by the by, just water and sewer plans, people don't, they're plans. And they're designed to regulate the system, obviously. The system, water and sewer systems, they like users. You got capacity.
That's true.
You gotta pay for the fixed cost for it. You want people to use it. So it's a guessing game when you, this is one that's ready to go, okay? This is something that looks like there's a developer, there's engineers, Collector Road. This is one where if it works out, they will start paying those $30,000 or $40,000 area connection fees, which the system likes, as opposed to, well, wait a minute, Joe down the street has a farm, he's got an existing capacity, but he's not gonna develop.
So I think we have that, again, time constraint, I mean, I'm cutting you off, I apologize.
Yeah, I'm good.
Any other questions?
Not a question, but a comment. It just seems to me that we got a couple of horses ahead of the cart here. To your initial conversation, Jeff, that, you know, we got 13 agencies that haven't weighed in. We have, you know, as part of the Tawnytown Water, or the recommendations for, in the master plan for water and sewer, there's a, looks like maybe 15 recommendations that Tawnytown initiate or reviewed and begin to take some action. A 12% leak in the system. I don't know if that's high, low, medium, but it seems pretty, from where I come from, that seems pretty high, 12% loss. So I just think that, I understand it's a Tawnytown municipal issue, but the road doesn't bother me too much. The enclave or non-enclave doesn't bother me too much. It's the water and sewer that I'm hung up on.
And I'll say, I mean, to borrow your phrase, I pretty much agree with this, you know? I mean, particularly if Tawnytown is initiating sort of, you know, the process, I mean, this all makes sense. It's a designated growth area. I think this is one of those things that should happen. I just feel like, you know, we're hearing, you know, when you're building a house and you go out there and the architect says one thing and the engineer says something else, you kind of want them to be on the same page.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Mr. Schaefer, you're a great advocate. You know, you really have. You know, Envy should be paying you more. At the same time, when we hear it's an enclave, no, it's not. It sort of is. Well, it looks like an enclave. I mean, you know, with the exception of the flipping road, it's an enclave. I mean, and again, I'm not averse to doing that, but I think there ought to be a conversation with the city, where the city basically says, yeah, we want to work towards that too, and we all know what the end result is going to be, and it's not going to be a patchwork at the end of the day. We're working towards this, and we all are of a like mind. I just feel like, you know, I'm sorry, I've got to go. We either need to call a motion or punt this for, you know, another meeting. And I apologize, because I'm the one turning into a pumpkin. What do we want to do? Because Mr. Schaefer's talked to himself. He's done everything he can do to move this. And again, I'm not averse. I just want to make sure, you know, when we're hearing something from county staff, I want to make sure we're all on the same page. And I just don't feel like I am. Does that make sense?
It does make sense.
So you weren't here for the master plan and the
No, I
freedom
wasn't.
and all that, but I guess I view it as this is for the future.
A continuation.
And this is, you know, the city is quote unquote possibly recommending it. But nothing can happen until, you know, it's just like when we said
Until we
we're
get another
gonna
waiver.
do our 10,000 on 97. Until you get the adequate facilities, nothing can happen. But you have to set it forward for the future.
Right.
So that's how I view it.
So your sense is that you would vote to recommend this with a positive recommendation to the county commissioners.
Yes.
All
I
the
think
other
it'll-
things still have to happen.
Absolutely.
We're not an impediment. You're recognizing Tawnytown is planning ahead. That's sort of your view, I think.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. That's one person.
I'm don't hear Mr. Lance's, I
There-
see
there
him
you
down,
go.
okay.
Well, listen, I'm gonna be, for the record, I've met with all the parties.
Okay.
I've met with the city of Tawnytown. I've met with some dude named Clark Schaefer. But I hesitate to say anything here because I wanna hear what you all have to say. Because obviously, there's a reason that I'm ex officio, because it goes from here to us on Thursday.
Right.
So I'd rather hear your recommendation. Now, with that being said, I wanna be very careful here. In meeting with all the parties, I haven't heard anything negative yet, because this is a long-range plan,
Right.
and I'll leave it at that. In the interest of being fair, I'll leave it at that.
So, I'll just say where I've come from. I mean, I've certainly listened to everything you all have said, and like so many times, we have competing interests that we're trying to balance out here. And sort of where I come down, just one voice, but, my concern about it being premature, I'm not sure there's a silver bullet there, because time still has to pass before anything's gonna happen. The question is, are we gonna be blocking it right now, or recommending that it be blocked? We're not gonna stop time. So, is it consistent with the master plan? Honestly, I appreciate your input, Mr. Schaefer. You helped me work past that. The enclave, I don't like the way it looks. It looks like an enclave to me, even though technically it's probably not. Maybe with time, that issue goes away because they have conversations, and maybe that gets fixed. So for me, I guess I come down on the side of, I'm probably not comfortable blocking this right now, or at least recommending that we block it. A lot of things still have to happen. They still have to be done correctly. So I guess my view is I would be in favor of sending it to the county commissioners with a positive recommendation, understanding all these things still have to happen, and some of these things may correct, and they're gonna have water and sewer capacity, or they're not in the future. But let the town do its long-range planning. If it comes to pass, that's a good thing. If it doesn't, it's life. So that's right.
I agree with that. I
Yeah,
think that's
so,
fair.
so can we just say that we make a recommendation based on what you said?
I think they gave us a proposed motion.
Can we pretty much make a recommendation?
Yeah, pretty much,
There's a
yeah,
motion.
there you go.
That's gonna come back to
No,
haunt me
I don't mean to
at a
be,
later meeting.
I'm sorry.
Where is that?
It's on page 6 of this report, and if you just change it to be positive recommendation, I think that can be the record. I'll read it into the record. It'd be one of you, but make a
Okay.
motion that the Carroll County Planning and Zoning Commission forward the comments outlined in this report, and the zoning and waiver request to the Board of County Commissioners with a favorable recommendation for the reasons stated in the record.
Okay, I will make that
So you adopt that as a motion?
Yes, I will.
Okay.
And I'm gonna do, a roll call vote, if that's okay. Actually,
Sure. We need a second
Yeah,
first?
need a second.
Is there-
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to adopt that as the motion.
And for the record, obviously I'll be in attendance on Thursday, and I will make sure that all of your discussion, comments, remarks, et cetera, are included in our discussion.
Okay.
Thank you. And you'll be abstaining today, I take it? Just
That's
so it's
correct.
clear. Okay, so, so we should have a roll call vote. So we have a motion. and a
Mr.
second.
Hall?
Yes.
Ms. Kirkner?
Yes.
Mr. Lester?
Yes.
Mr. Kane?
Yes.
Please let the record reflect that 4 in favor and the motion carries.
Thank you. Thank you all very much.
We're pretty much finished.
Yeah, I think you can be,
I'm pretty much sure.
thank you all very much. We appreciate
I'm
your.
sorry.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Y'all be good.
You too.
This is future.
Can I have this?
Everything has to happen before.
I feel like we're supposed to vet.
I sent you an email yesterday. You sent me one?
I took a lot of notes,
Thank you.
and all of your comments are warranted. They really are.
Well, hopefully the vetting helps.
It definitely will. But I think that
You know, and my guess is whoever bought that property, that's the
the concurrency management presentation, which was, we'll go back to the original numbering, it's item 11.
Still morning. Okay, still morning. Good morning.
Still morning, yeah.
Good morning.
That's funny, too.
So,
Where'd that go?
okay. Thank you. Laura Tias, Bureau of Development Review. This is pretty much the concurrency report. So, yeah, I've done extensions sitting up here. I've done plenty of planning commission reports to you, and this one's kind of new for me. So, and it might be new to some of you as well, actually. It's been a couple years here since we delivered the report. So, this is our concurrency management report for fiscal year 21. And the timing on delivery is perhaps a little delayed. We're usually here a little bit earlier, maybe around January, February. But happy coincidence that a lot of this, what I'm going to talk about, also ties into next month. You will have Bill Kane here in front of you, delivering the school for Carroll County Public Schools, the student enrollment data and projections. So, process-wise, I literally delivered you reports today on your desk, and that was part of the bigger process. Today, I'm going to give you an overview of how this looks for 2021. So a summary, some recommendations, give you a month's time to take a look at the content in the report. And then next month, when Mr. Kane is here, my aim is to come back before you, tied together with that, and to look for your approval to forward to the Board of County Commissioners the concurrency manager report. Does that make sense, process-wise?
It does, yes, thank you.
Excellent.
Appreciate the overview.
Yeah, and so here today, as I said, in accordance with Chapter 156. So this is our Adequate Public Facilities and Concurrency Management is the title of this chapter. I feel like everybody today so far has set the stage for me. David Beecraft gave a wonderful concurrency, was part of his report of that preliminary plan because that was a major subdivision subject to concurrency. So he did a very in-depth presentation of that. Perfect, and then we were just talking about water sewer capacities and whose systems, and so that all, of course, ties into concurrency. So the purpose of this chapter is to ensure that residential growth in the county will not unduly strain public facilities. So again, this is county code. Municipalities are not within, they're not subject to our code. So the municipalities they independently define their levels of adequacy, which again, you heard a little bit about from Price already. So that is not covered in our chapter, right? Well, what it does include are major subdivisions, site plans for residential development. So we've seen some of this recently where we have like an age-restricted development. We just approved one recently along Route 26, subject to concurrency because it was a residential development, but a site plan. And mobile home parks are also covered in this chapter. So what are exempt are off conveyances, minor subdivisions, 3 lots or less, commercial, industrial, and municipalities, as I already said. So gives you kind of just an overview for those who are a little newer to the commission and haven't seen as many concurrency reports.
Good reminder for the rest of us, too.
Sure. And for us, all the time. So you will see numbers in the report of how many off conveyances were approved this fiscal year. But again, not subject to concurrency. So what I want to do is go through a summary, so highlighting it, and you can pull this in the report. So summary is on pages 4 and 5 of your paper packets, and recommendations are on page 5, as well as 26 and 27. So again, I'm going to give kind of an overview of where we are in the county with residential development, put that into context using some of the previous backdate 6 fiscal year period, and then offer some recommendations moving forward, okay? So, development activity. Again, this puts it into context. We're going back 6 fiscal years, so 16 through 21, right? And we see lots approved by the Planning Commission. So through the process, you'll see that major subdivision, right? Like today, you saw David's project, and the preliminary plan for that was approved. So that tallies into the lots that you're approving. Then the plan moves into that final stage. As you know, you may or may not see it back, which your question today. So if it is fully adequate, you won't see it back at final unless you request it come back. So the approval authority goes to the chair unless everybody wants to see it again. If there is an approaching inadequate, right, like we saw today with Gamber, we do a conditional approval, and then we bring it forward to you again once we reassess it for concurrency. So here we have preliminary and final plans that were the lots, the number of lots approved by the Planning Commission. So, and then we go to lots recorded, right? And so recorded is your next step. And as you also heard today, we had 3 extensions today. Those were plans that were approved. Now, one was a minor, but 2 were majors, right? So those lots factored in, right? They were approved, but they received extensions, right? So the number of lots that are recorded doesn't always line up exactly, right, with what's approved, because the timing doesn't always go together. So I'm gonna go forward one more. So lots recorded, so we recorded, what is that greater number, right there, I'm sorry. So we recorded 282 lots in fiscal year 21. 230 of those were in municipalities. Again, so they're not subject to our concurrency. We do factor in the numbers, but they have their own assessment, right, as to adequacy. So, and of those numbers, the 230, interestingly enough, those were only in 2 municipalities, Tawnytown and Westminster. So that's where we were seeing those this past year. So totals, again, I'm on page 4 and 5. So the Planning Commission, that breaks down to the Planning Commission approved 13 subdivisions and 22 lots. As we can see that number there, that 22. So that 22 was in 13 different subdivisions. 12 of those lots were subject to concurrency. Okay. Then we move to permits issued. So permits issued is not to exceed 6,000 in a 6-year period. So we are we are well below that, right, at this point in time. Back in like late 90s, concurrency was adopted in 1998. So way back, we were seeing big numbers. Today, this fiscal year, 16 to 21, we're at 2181. 2,181 residential units were issued a permit. Okay. So we're well below the 6,000. So then we move to, well, where is that growth occurring? Which then leads us to, as we assess the facilities. So we have schools, roads, water and sewer, police, fire and EMS, okay? So that growth then, of course, where it's focused is going to impact some of our facilities. So I wanna highlight those areas that are challenged, right now and why, and that leads us to next month with Mr. Kane as well. And David touched on the fire. Gamber was one of those. So of all of those that I just listed, the facilities that we test, the ones that are perfectly adequate right now, and you'll see in the back of this under recommendations, there are no recommendations regarding. So roads, water and sewer, police, and EMS are all adequate, okay? The challenges right now, so schools. And schools, particularly in the southern area of the county, in the Freedom area where we're seeing a lot of growth. So we do have a couple of approaching inadequacies for the upcoming years. So now we're looking out at projected enrollments. Okay, so projected data from Carroll County Public Schools goes out, we went out to 2027, okay? So we have Carrolltown, Sandy Mount, and Westminster Elementary are all projected to be approaching inadequate at some point between 24 and 27, so a little further out still. Freedom Elementary School, so was anticipated to be approaching inadequate in fiscal year 21, okay? And projected to become inadequate in 22 through 27. So we're now actually in 22. So that was a projection, okay? So Bill is going to come to you with actual data, hopefully, for the current fiscal year. So the actual data for 2021, it's my understanding that that's not yet available. So it's anticipated that Freedom was approaching inadequate for 2021, truly, and that is inadequate. We're going to go with for 22 moving forward. So with that, as you probably know as well, the schools put together a redistricting committee to look at modifying those district lines. That actually started in motion prior to 2020. Then, early 2020, COVID comes along and throws a wrench kind of in. So the schools are, they shift, absolutely. They put all their focus into handling all the modifications that came along with the pandemic in regards to the schools. So the redistricting committee was put on hold. We started up again in January this year. Linda and I are both part of that work group. We go to those meetings, attend those meetings, and they have been occurring every 2 weeks since January.
3 hours.
And pretty intensive, 2 to 3 hours, right? So their goal is to come to the Board of Education with multiple options for the board to work through and to select which option they would like to go through. So that's in process right now. Their timeline goal, as it was presented to us, is to go before the Board of Education in the fall of this year, 2022, and hopefully to enact that redistricting for the 2023-2024 school year. Okay. So the recommendation, as I have included on page 5 in this, our recommendation is that the existing inadequacy being addressed by the redistricting be recognized as mitigation acceptable to the county once the Board of Education approves the committee's proposed redistricting plan. So once the board says yes, then there has to be the actual enactment of that redistricting, right? But we felt as a bureau, as a department, that once that the Board of Education says yes to something, we could accept that as mitigation. So then plans could move forward through their final approval process. Make sense?
It does, yes.
Okay. So elementary schools, middle schools, we do have a couple approaching inadequacies for 22 through 27 Oklahoma Road Middle and Sykesville Middle. So again, we're down in the southern area of the county. And high schools, good news, they're all rated adequate. Okay, so the other area that I just want to highlight, so fire. So fire stations, we have 9 right now. The good news is we're getting data on fire and emergency services. We did have a period of time, which some of you may remember, where we weren't getting the data. That was back in 2018, 2019, and they have since, in 2020, they gave us all the back information as well as moving forward. So we're getting that information, which is great. But we do have 9 approaching inadequates. So David spoke of Gamber earlier, and this is as defined by the average response time measure, so time. Hampstead, Tawnytown, Pleasant Valley, Lineborough, Reese, New Windsor, Harney, Gamber, and Winfield. So they're all in an approaching category. Again, that may work itself out by the time a plan comes before you as a final. We do, previously, the CC Visa was having discussions as to their threshold standards, right? To pulling in consideration of automatic sprinkler systems, personnel, etc. So we're hopeful that that conversation will continue, and now that we do have our new director of fire and emergency services, we're hopeful that that conversation will still, I'm sure they have probably many things to talk about at this point, but hopefully that conversation will continue. Maybe the threshold standards are modified.
You would think there'd be a groundswell of support for our volunteer fire departments by developers, because there's probably a little recognized connection between the ability to develop and these response times, meaning the resources of our volunteer fire departments. I mean, I wouldn't know about that connection unless I had gotten educated by serving here. So I know Commissioner Wentz is very active in those sorts of things. He knows that connection very well, but a lot of us out there might not get that connection. So maybe there's an opportunity to educate some of the folks that are, developing, coming before us from time to time.
But I think to that end, the very fact that we're making the decisions that we are about the future of fire and EMS is really raising a lot of eyebrows now, because we spend a lot of time in the budgetary process, and you'll hear more about that during that presentation. But the very fact that we are seeing some proposed inadequacies, and we are infusing some career help into those volunteer stations, will certainly pique the interest of those developers or whoever as we move forward here. So,
yeah, very good. Anyway, just as an aside, but that connection, I was surprised by the connection, I guess. And
right.
Yes.
Others might be as well.
And the other thing, as you also heard David speak about, are bridges, right? So how do you get from point A, the station, to point B, where you're responding? So we do have 4 bridges that are currently in the CIP that are currently inadequate for certain fire and emergency response apparatus that we are putting funding towards to repair those. Okay. So then we'll simply, I'm going to jump to page 26, 27 at the back, which are the overall recommendations, right? So truly, it breaks it down into recommended capital improvements. To note in there, as I just said, we have the bridges, and they're called out in here as to which bridges on which roads, right? McKinstry Mill Road, Hawks Hill Road, Babylon Road, and Old Case Mill Road are where the bridges are that are in that CIP plan. For schools, I know capital improvements are recommended, but that redistricting to mitigate the inadequacy is being pursued. So Building permit caps. Again, so in regards to schools, again, that they create their districts. And the redistricting committee, again, I reiterated, when they are seeking that approval and implementation. So we have a timeline that we have in our minds as we move forward.
If I can just add to that
Sure.
too. We have our educational facilities master plan that Mr. Kane will go over next month. In addition to that, we did ask him for an update on the committee as well, so he can give you more detailed information about their process and what's happening with the Southern Area Redistricting Committee itself. So just to add to that.
That's great. Yes, thank you. So changes to boundaries, no changes are recommended. We do have under fire and EMS, of course, that the review of, just to note, the review of development proposals uses the first two district to as established by fire and emergency medical stations. And then under schools, under that about boundaries, we use the enrollment districts for each school to evaluate. So when those shift, that will shift. If and when, anticipating they will shift. And then threshold standards, the only, no changes are recommended. However, CCVSA should continue their discussion on recognizing the presence of automatic sprinklers, utilization of staffing, paid personnel, and response time measurements. So, and then we have changes in concurrency analysis. No changes are recommended, and proposed amendments to Chapter 156. No changes are recommended. So that's an overview of where we are in terms of residential growth, and then the facilities that are covered in Chapter 156. Again, those are the highlights, that's the summary, those are the recommendations. I'll give you, the next month to take a look at it. Actually, in the report, which is very helpful, is an overview, a little history of concurrency, as well as it then goes into how, let's say, schools, right? What it means to be approaching inadequate or inadequate, what those numbers are, water sewer capacities, what those numbers are and how they're evaluated. So that's just a little deeper. That's reading for you. I didn't want to read all that to you.
No,
Thank you.
appreciate that.
Hopefully you appreciate that, Rick.
Yeah, we do. Good. Any questions for Laura? We'll be reading it, obviously. Very helpful.
Yep.
Thank you. Really appreciate you putting this together.
Laura, is your technical, when we come back in May, they'd have to approve this report, correct?
So, right.
You have some draft language at the end, I saw.
Yep.
What's that?
You have some draft language for us.
I do.
proposed.
It's at the very end.
Page 27.
So we'll insert a date to that, right, on X date. The Carroll County Planning and Zoning Commission voted to forward the concurrency manager report to the Board of County Commissioners with a favorable recommendation for adoption, and including school data and student population projections from Mr. Kane.
Okay, so this will be then on our May
Yes,
business
please.
meeting
Yep.
agenda for you all. Okay.
Sound good?
All good?
So that's the standard, third Tuesday meeting is when
Yes.
Mr. Kane is coming, okay.
Very good. Laura, thank you
Thank you.
very much. So with that, we will move to our last item. And Mr. Wagner, that has your name all over it. And that is agricultural and zoning text, agricultural and conservation zoning text, and it's a discussion.
So, as we came to you earlier in the month, we gave you the introduction to the agriculture conservation work group and what they went over. In front of you here today is Chris Wagner, and then Tiffany Fawcett and Hannah Weber, who put together the first part that we're gonna start with is our discussion on accessory dwelling units. We have been here a very long time today, so my suggestion is let's get through our presentation, and for the next meeting, on our next Wednesday evening meeting, we can follow up with discussion after we've heard this today. I think that would be beneficial for everyone. Also, Land and Resource Management also prepared a letter which was given to you this morning as well about their thoughts and considerations on accessory dwelling units. So with that, I'm gonna have Hannah and Tiffany present to you the information on ADUs. This was a topic of great discussion during our agricultural conservation work groups. Not so much the concept of accessory dwelling units, which are allowed in most districts, but making them potentially detached in our county code. So with that, I'm gonna have Hannah and Tiffany present to you.
Before you start, you had mentioned a letter. If I got it, I misplaced it.
Did we not pass it out?
It should be, it looks like a memo.
Oh, the memorandum?
Yes.
Yep, that's it.
Okay,
Thank you.
good. Okay, I'm sorry. Go right ahead.
So as Linda introduced, this is a part of the ag conservation zoning text specifically for the ADUs. So getting started, what is an ADU? An accessory dwelling unit is a small residence that shares a single-family lot with a larger primary dwelling. You commonly hear them referred to as granny flats, guest houses, or in-law suites. ADUs can be both attached or separated from the principal dwelling. And some benefits of having ADUs are they provide practical housing options for elderly, disabled, empty nesters, and young adults. And below are just some examples of some ADU layouts that you can see. So in the current code, we have attached accessory dwellings and detached accessory dwellings defined. Attached accessory dwellings are defined as a portion of a single-family dwelling that shall provide complete independent living facilities for sleeping, eating, cooking, and sanitation within the main dwelling unit, but which is separate from the main dwelling unit's cooking, bathroom, and living areas. Going to the detached accessory dwelling definition, a dwelling unit excluding a mobile home on the same lot as the primary dwelling unit, but is physically separated from the primary dwelling unit. A detached accessory dwelling unit shall provide complete independent living facilities for one or more persons, including permanent facilities for living, sleeping, eating, cooking, and sanitation. So going further into the code, we have some similarities in how our code regulates the attached and detached ADUs. So both types of ADUs must have direct access from the outside. The property owner must occupy one of the two units, whether they stay in the main dwelling or the accessory. 2 additional off-street parking spaces are required for the accessory unit. And the water and sewer infrastructure regulations are the same for both attached and detached ADUs, and we obtain that information from the Department of Health. So on the other end, there are differences in how our code regulates the ADUs. For attached ADUs, there is a size limitation of 800 square feet, or 1/3 the floor area of the principal dwelling. Attached ADUs can have no more than 2 bedrooms, and they are allowed in the ag and conservation districts. So though we have detached accessory dwelling units defined in our code, it is very misleading in how they are regulated in the code. Detached accessory dwelling units are not truly accessory or subordinate to the principal dwelling because they are actually a secondary dwelling on the lot. We say this because a detached accessory dwelling unit can only be constructed if the lot is eligible to be subdivided. Taking that a step further, there is no size limit on the secondary dwelling construction size. So before we get more into that, as Linda said, this was a very intense conversation during the work group. So looking at attached ADUs again, the work group recommended to remove the 1/3 size stipulation, leaving the 800 maximum size limit for the accessory dwelling. And then they also are recommending to require that attached ADUs can be no more than 15 feet away from the principal dwelling, and they must be connected by a livable space, which means that the connected space must be heated. And there was no consensus reached for detached ADUs. Looking into the conversations and discussion points with the work group, these were the main discussion topics. So will detached ADUs increase density? It is our view that these detached ADUs will not. Currently in the code, we allow 2-family dwellings permitted by right in the ag district. So limiting the size of an ADU and the distance the ADU can be from the main dwelling would keep the ADU from becoming a separate additional dwelling. And then moving on, what are the water and sewer implications? We talked to the Department of Health, as I said earlier, and they treat attached and detached ADUs the same way. The 3 acres would be the minimum necessary acreage for a new septic system, whether that septic system serves the individual ADU or the ADU and the primary dwelling combined into one system.
So if we could just expand upon that just a little bit. So if they were built together, that the accessory dwelling unit attached or detached was built at the same time as the primary, they could go onto the same septic system because it would be assigned appropriately. If it came after the primary dwelling, they would need a new system, or else they'd have to replace the original system to be able to handle the expanded usage.
So in essence, yeah, so in essence, what would be happening, so the primary dwelling would need a 10,000 square foot sewage disposal area, so that has your primary and then your area for 2 reserves. The health department looks at whether it's attached or detached exactly the same way. So you will need another 10,000 square foot area for the primary with backup and reserve. So if the houses are, let's say they're done together, or a person has, their system is currently needs to be replaced, and they want to do a dwelling unit, whether it's attached in this case or detached, whichever way, then they could potentially look at it and say, okay, I'll put in a 20,000 square foot area, which will handle both the primary and my accessory dwelling unit. 3 acres is about as small, talking with the health department, is as small as they would recommend. That can, including everything else that's needed, the driveways, the stormwater management, that could handle potentially a 20,000 square foot total area, plus everything else needs to be in there. So 3 acres is pretty much the minimum lot size that a detached or attached accessory dwelling unit could go on.
So the last big discussion topic we had with the work group was what would happen when the property is sold, and we would say that all the regulations would remain in place, including the inability to subdivide. So as we said in the beginning, we are here before you to obtain guidance on how you would like us to proceed with our concept team. So we have outlined kind of 2 paths that we could take. We have the first is to keep the code as written and change the name from a detached accessory dwelling unit to a secondary dwelling unit, because as we discussed, we don't have a detached accessory dwelling unit because it's not subordinate to the principal dwelling. The second option we've laid out is to create a true detached accessory dwelling unit, which is allowable on lots that are not subdividable and with certain restrictions. And we just came up with some possible restrictions that could be placed on a detached ADU. So we have an 800 square foot maximum size limit, which is also what applies to attached ADUs. We have the 3 acre minimum lot size, as Price explained, for water and sewer. Maximum of 40 to 50 feet away from the principal dwelling. No more than 2 bedrooms, which is the standard for the attached ADU as well. And to continue the regulation that one of the dwellings must be occupied by the property owner, which is what's in the code right now. So.
Well, that's that's very helpful, and we certainly appreciate the robust discussions and looking at this from every angle, because there's a lot to it. We've seen it obviously in some of the other, like in residential, I think, where we had these attached dwelling unit issues come up. So given the time, I think I like your suggestion that we can have a discussion about this at our next meeting maybe, because there's a lot to think about. But this is a very helpful framework, so I really do appreciate the good work that you all have done in bringing this.
So we have some other materials, so maybe what we can do prior to the next meeting is send you this presentation as well as a frequently asked questions sheet that they have developed.
That's great.
So we can send you all of that for the discussion, as well as you have information from Land and Resource Management, the member that they provided as well.
That sounds really good. What do you all think?
Yep.
So good? Excellent. Yes. Yeah, we appreciate that. Thanks again. All right, then I think that concludes this presentation, right?
Yes, it does.
Okay. Well, then the last item is general public comment. Does anybody have any general public comment? All right, hearing none, then I would be happy to entertain a motion for adjournment.
I make a motion that we adjourn.
Is there a second out there somewhere?
A second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, it's unanimous. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
We are adjourned.